I'm not being hyperbolic when I say every time a scene like this happened, I would get chills all over my body.
Because
She'd be like, he knows her way like born to them. I'd be like, every single time.
I recognize you.
Every
Lisa
time,
Nagaib.
every single time. Like, it's so good.
No, they got me. I keep having to like check myself and be like, he's not the chosen one.
I Googled this 3 times already.
Yeah.
He's not the chosen one.
I've seen the second movie. He is not the chosen one.
But then I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, and that's like exactly the point though.
Hi, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this is Welcome to the Writer's Room, the show where we analyze media in various forms and tell you why it works or why it doesn't.
Today we are talking about the first Dune movie that came out in 2021.
Potential spoilers for not only this movie, but the sequel movie, Dune Part 2, or the original books written by Frank Herbert, and any extended universe lore about Dune at all. You've been warned.
Okay, so we have a summary for the movie. Let's start.
All right. Lisa Nagaib.
Dune is the story of Paul Atreides, the son of Leto, Duke of the Great House Atreides, and Lady Jessica. Jessica is a powerful woman with special abilities and a member of the Bene Gesserits, a religious group with immense political power. The story centers around the planet Arrakis, where spice is harvested as the most valuable resource. Currently, House Harkonnen, a brutal and intense people, runs Arrakis. But the Emperor has now chosen to give Arrakis to House Atreides. As they prepare to transition from their home to planet Arrakis, Paul trains the Voice, a power the Bene Gesserits use to control people. We meet Duncan Idaho, who has been sent to learn more about the Fremen, the people native to Arrakis who are powerful fighters and live off of the desert. Paul has been having prophetic visions that have only strengthened since landing on Arrakis. This culminates in a betrayal on House Atreides, who are attacked by the Harkonnens and the Emperor under Baron Vladimir. The Judge of Change, Dr. Kynes, helps save Paul and Jessica, but Leto is captured and dies. Paul and Jessica flee into the desert looking for Fremen. They weather an intense storm and giant sandworms. Upon finding the Fremen, they are challenged to a duel by Jamis. Chani, the girl Paul has been seeing in his visions, gives him a blade cultivated from the sandworm's tooth. Paul fights Jamis, and although he does not want to, he must take Jamis's life. He does so and has rebirthed himself, deciding to follow the Fremen into the desert.
Let's go. 1 minute, 19 seconds.
Okay.
Not bad. This was such a packed movie.
I know.
Oh my goodness. So before we start, do we want to, this is unlike sort of the other things we've covered on the podcast so far. This is not a first time viewing for either of us.
Right.
We've both seen both movies because they're both out multiple times. I feel like this is like the third or fourth time I've seen the first one.
It's definitely at minimum the fourth, because we saw the first one twice in theaters. We went twice.
Yes, I remember that.
And then we recently watched it when the second one came out this year.
Okay.
And so this is at least our fourth time watching it. At least
the fourth one. I read the book right after the first movie came out, but I don't really remember anything about the book.
Oh, interesting, because I have quite a few book questions, but okay.
I remember like liking it, but I don't know. I go through like periods where I'd like to read and then I just get busy and don't.
Right.
And I feel like Dune was a book that I hopped back into reading, and I don't think I was mentally prepared for all the characters, the lore, the made up words. Yeah. So I remember having a good time, but like detail wise, I could not tell you a single thing about it.
It's a lot. Even in this is, like I said, the fourth time watching it, I caught things that I hadn't caught the first time. It's just really dense.
Yeah, something I wrote down multiple times is looking back on it, there are some things that they chose to make really, really obvious. And they make it obvious by calling back to it multiple times.
Right.
Like within the first like 20 minutes of the movie, I think they tell the audience explicitly that it's bad that they're on Arrakis now, like 4 times.
Right.
But I remember the first time watching the movie, that did not bother me. I was not like, this is too obvious, because you've got this very clear through line that I did catch the first time, as well as 50 other things that I did not catch.
Yeah.
So it's so dense, but I feel like they do a good job of sort of layering on importance what you should really be taking the first, second, third time through.
Because I remember the first time seeing it, I wasn't like, I understood it enough to absolutely love it and still have some questions after. But that kind of was part of the fun, right? You want to know more about the lore and the characters as you go through in such like an epic story. Yeah. So it didn't necessarily, I could see how a more casual watcher might feel like this is a lot. It's not really for them. But I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Something else is, this is the first time I think either of us have seen it since seeing the second film. So, do you see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I guess you're right.
Because we watched it like 3 times, then we went and saw the second film twice. So this is the first time seeing the first film, knowing what happens in the second one.
That is true.
Which I think so many things they did in this one, I was like, oh, that's really good. Y'all set that up for the second film. Like some really small things that were cool details that, like, as we go through the plot, I can point out. But I think that's really cool that watching these back to back, they do feel connected, not just because of the story and the lore. They do specific things to connect them, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. I thought it was really funny. This like 2.5-hour movie of all this cool stuff. I loved it. And I wrote down, I can't believe this is all just rising action.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Like the plot hasn't started yet. This is all prologue. They did such a good
job too, though, to make it interesting. And there's so many things they did, so many smart and clever things to make it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to do another video on Dune 2. So we're going to mostly talk about Dune 1 in this one.
Mm-hmm.
But we might reference Dune 2. Don't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, they're so connected. So many things like pay off in the second one.
Right.
It's hard to keep them separate once you know both.
This one, I've wondered for a while which one I think is better. I think Dune 2
Dune
is
2.
like, it's
Absolutely.
crazy
Absolutely.
good. So I'm not worried.
But don't worry. Dune 1
is
walked,
really good.
so Dune 2 could fly, right?
Right. It's really good. So we can go through, I think, the plot and just kind of like stop along the way of points we want to talk about.
Yeah, a lot of the times I found myself like every scene I was like, wow, this looks gorgeous. Wow, the sound design is fantastic. Wow, the acting is phenomenal. So I think like maybe just stopping on specific things that really impressed us or something. Because I like, if you need our review, the movie's good. You should watch it.
I want to talk about how it starts because I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So it starts with a voiceover. It's Zendaya, and she's talking about how beautiful Arrakis is, and she just kind of gives you like this overview of what's going on. And I don't think I realized how. So Dune carries so many really important themes that are like weirdly relevant to today, even though it's like a pretty old story.
Yeah, I think it was the 80s it came out, or was it before
60s? It was the 60s.
Oh, that was annoying.
And the movie came out in the 80s, the first one.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. And it's kind of like shocking to me, but it also does make perfect sense. Right. So many things about like colonization and like imperialism and just like, I mean, especially in the second movie, like this white savior narrative, all of these things that are such like big ideas that seem kind of like progressive in the 1960s. But then you also remember the 1960s was like this this crazy time of change.
Yeah, this was civil rights movement. 1965 it was published.
So like the time period of the 1960s, to me, this coming out actually makes a lot of sense, that someone like looked around and saw all the immense change and like political unrest in the world and wrote something that felt so still impactful today, because a lot of what we were dealing with them, I feel like is still relevant to now. So I think it's really cool.
I agree.
So like for them to open on a Fremen member, and I think Dune 1 sets up a lot of what Dune 2 does to bring the themes to fruition. But I think this opening is like a great example of that. So she's doing this voiceover about the planet Arrakis, and the first thing she says is that it's so beautiful during the day. And it's like this beautiful shot of Arrakis and the sand and the dunes. Yeah. And it just like shows this undisturbed, beautiful planet. And I
don't know how they made dunes look pretty for 2.5 straight hours, but they did. Every shot of the desert is gorgeous.
But then she immediately goes, and at nightfall they harvest. And she starts talking about like how cruel they are and how the Harkonnens take the spice. And I just think it's really cool. They continue this on where they'll show the planet multiple times and its beauty, and then immediately go into how it's being colonized and how it's being, they'll start with it. And this was like the first example of that. And I just think it's just a really good way to start it, to tell you this is what this is about. This is about a planet that is under the thumb of what it doesn't belong to those people. It belongs to us, the Fremen. And to have Chani, who's barely in this movie, start it. Yeah. I think it's just really, and then it even shows them like fighting them. I think it's just, if you were to like boil down what Dune is about, like this opening is the perfect example of that. And I think it's such a good way to start the movie. Yeah, I agree. I also really like the other, talking about like the 60s and radicalization and things like that. The other big thing that the story did is it's a subversion of the Chosen One narrative, which we've talked at length about. Yes. And that's really cool
for a whole bunch of reasons we can get into. But the premise boils down to everyone thinks that Paul, our main character, is like the chosen one. He's destined to do this thing, this prophecy that exists. And as the movie goes on, you find out that certain people came up with the prophecy, but some people believe the prophecy. And like, is it real or is it not? And it's by the end of Dune 2, this is, I guess, a spoiler, it's pretty cemented that this is not real, right? He is absolutely not the chosen one. There's no such thing. It's not how it happens. And even from the very beginning, we see Chani giving the narration.
Yes.
And she says specifically, I wonder who our next oppressor will be. And it cuts not to Caladan, where Paul is. It cuts to Paul sleeping in bed.
Not to Leto. Not to... Yeah. It goes to Paul.
Which is very cool.
Again, it's so good. Like, this movie is so smart. And I wrote that down too, because I was like, that's one, just to call oppressor. Like, we look at Paul and he is the chosen one. He is our protagonist. And the first thing we hear about him is that he's an oppressor.
Yeah. And it's subconscious too. Right. Because when we see Paul, he's just like a kid. He doesn't know what's going on.
He's a good guy, right?
But you've got this in the back of your mind. Like, he's meant for something more. Which it sets the stage perfectly in so little words.
And I think in general, that's like an example of a really good transition. In general, I think part of the way they can make this story move, because there's not a ton of dialogue, like it's a lot of, and that probably goes back to the books being very introspective, right? From what I've been told.
Yeah, it's very detail oriented, like a lot of descriptions of things.
And so I think they use transitions to their advantage to keep things entertained and to push the story forward. And like, there's other examples about it. But yeah, I think what you're talking about is he's kind of not only do people think he is the Lisan al-Gaib, which is like the Arrakis world's messiah, right? But the Bene Gesserits also have the Kwisatz Haderach, right? Yeah. Which they believe is also like a chosen one figure. And so he has these two destinies that are telling him he is the chosen one, even though he doesn't really want this. And I just think it's really cool to like explore these themes.
Adding on to what you were saying, I think throughout the entire movie, it does a really, really good job of a perfect balance of showing and telling at the same time. Because like from the opening narration, the lines people say to each other, I would say the dialogue is actually very in your face obvious.
I think so too. Yes.
But it's explaining things that are either very, very complicated. Like in that opening narration, we learned who the Fremen are, who the Harkonnens are, where we are, what the Harkonnens are doing there, why they don't like them there. We find out all these things within like 5 obvious sentences. And then they show us a bunch of shit. They show us the Fremen fighting. So we understand, they use sand to their advantage. We know the landscape of where we're at. And I think throughout the entire movie, they do a really, really good job of that. They tell us the things that would make the movie drag if they showed us. Yes. And they showed us things that they didn't need to tell us. So we get this fully encapsulated idea of what they're trying to give us every single time.
Yeah, it's really good. So we meet Paul Atreides and we meet his mom, Jessica. And like I said, Jessica is one of the Bene Gesserits, which I think the Bene Gesserits are such a cool concept. Like, I think Jessica might be my favorite character just because she's so interesting and you kind of don't know where her loyalties lie sometimes. It's just very, very cool.
No, they should definitely make a show about them.
He's saying that because Dune Prophecy is coming out, which is about the Bene Gesserits.
Which we will be covering. That's why we're doing these Dune episodes.
We meet Jessica, and in this first scene of her, which, by the way, I looked at their name meanings because like, Paul's pretty on the nose for like this chosen one messiah character, but his name means humble, which is cool because that's like kind of his whole thing is he doesn't want this put on him. And Jessica's name means like foresight and to behold. And I just think that's really cool for someone who has all these like very interesting like abilities. Yeah. So we learn that the Bene Gesserits have the voice, which is this ability to control people, and like they can use it to get people to do what they want. And it's like not exactly, they have to use their voice actually to do it, and they have to be heard. So if someone can't hear them, they can't use it. I think one, that's cool because it does provide some limitations.
Sure.
But also Frank Herbert, I think he did an interview at one point, and he talked about how his choice behind having these political and religious figures to have this power, because that happens in the real world, right? This idea like propaganda and how people can use their voice to control people, and religious figures and political figures can use their voice.
That's cool.
And literally control people using that. It's like a real world power. He just kind of amped up a little bit. And that's really cool to think about in the 1960s, what was happening then. But even like today.
Yeah.
That's such a really, really interesting thing.
I like that a lot.
And we learn that Paul is having these dreams, and specifically of Chani, a girl who's a Fremen girl, and of Rakis. And he's having these dreams because he's like part Bene Gesserit, right? Like because like we said, and I think we'll talk probably more about how he's not truly the chosen one when we get to Dune 2, and that's like explored more. But it's not because he's not having these dreams because he is chosen. He's having these dreams just because it's like a Bene Gesserit thing, right?
Yeah, so I was Redditing while we were watching through the movie, because every time something like prophecy-ish did happen, I was like, wait a minute, why did this happen?
Right,
and then like what I thought was really cool is that like all of the, and this probably does it more in the book and I just forget, like all of the prophecy things get like pretty easily explained away.
Okay.
Just by like either actual coincidence or just people being in the right place, knowing the right things. Like a lot of what Paul's going through, like you're saying, the visions, is because he's specifically a man training in the Bene Gesserit, which has never happened before, which is unnatural, right? In the second movie, the grandmother says like, you're an abomination, right? So yeah, he like, his body is not adapted to training in this way. So like all this weird shit is happening. And when he gets introduced to the spice, it's amped up even more. And because of their like confirmation bias, Jessica's like, yes, you are definitely the chosen one, instead of this like failed experiment that's happening, you know?
Yeah. No, so yeah, because in the books, the Bene Gesserits, they have all these different things, but one of them is they can control the gender of their kids. And so they choose to have only girls. And part of that is because of they've been, even in this movie, she tells Paul, they've been carefully crossing bloodlines to eventually have this chosen one figure, the Kwisatz Haderach, right? And I think it's really interesting because we talked a lot about like, is this real? Is this prophecy between these two people real? Because the Bene Gesserits are incredibly powerful, but they're powerful in a way where they sit in the sidelines and you don't realize that they are controlling everything. And we talked a lot about if it's real, if they believe this is real, this prophecy is real. And it's kind of, I mean, I think Jessica does, but the thing is that she's also making moves to try and create the prophecy because she feels like she wants Paul, her son, to be the one who fits this prophecy. And so it's not only just like fate, but it's these people manipulating, quote, fate. Yeah. And specifically Jessica, which I think is so interesting.
For sure. Which we find out when what's her name? Like the
Reverend Mother.
The Reverend Mother. Even like calls her out when they have the meeting later. She's like, you have the son because of your pride of thinking you are going to make the chosen one, which is like, it follows her like the entire movie. Like that, like that's one of her like fatal flaws. Is she truly believes like, yes, I'm the one and Paul is the one. And that like really fucks him over all the time.
And so she chose to have a son. That makes a lot of sense that Paul is not able to like handle this because there are no men Bene Gesserit. It's only women. So in my notes, I wrote Timmy for anything Paul did. Okay. So I keep wanting to say Timmy. Because that's like the actor who plays
Which
him.
Honestly, do you want to talk about like the casting a little bit of the movie?
Sure, I can go ahead and go into like ideas on casting. I think casting was absolutely genius. And part of that, the director came out and even said he knew that older audience members would like the movie Dune and want to go see it. And like this specific demographic would be interested in that story, specifically older. But he chose to cast Gen Z actors in order to appeal to that younger audience, which is really cool. And I also would like move that maybe even to genders because sci-fi has been like male dominated a lot of the times. Yeah. And that's part of why I like love the character of Jessica, because I don't think we get a lot of like crazy powerful and nuanced women in sci-fi a lot of the times. Yeah. So like having the Bene Gesserits, it's so much fun. And he chose to cast these Gen Z actors to appeal to that audience. And I don't think I personally like, I don't know, I might have seen it because you would have wanted to, but if not for Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet being in this, I don't think I would have been interested in it. Even though it is this like right up my alley epic material, I just think
that's the thing. I feel like it's Dune itself is very Lord of the Rings to me, whereas like it does seem very cool, but getting into it seems so daunting.
Yeah.
And I'm sure before the movies came out, and probably even now, the fan bases for something like Dune are not going to be like, yes, of course, come on in, right? Like they're, you know, I just feel a lot of gatekeeping. So not only do I think that was a really genius choice to cast in that way, because that does encourage a whole other generation of viewers to go watch it, I also think it's a perfect storm of all these younger actors are truly like top of their class. Like Timothée Chalamet is a phenomenal actor. Zendaya's in the movie for 10 minutes and she stole the show. In the second one, Florence Pugh comes in and absolutely demolishes her role. What's his name? Who plays
Austin Butler.
He's great. Like it's really like this
Anya Taylor-Joy
sort of crop of actors who are our exact age is like just
a little
really
older, a little older.
It's just really fun to watch because like not only was this a strategic casting choice, I think it was also just a good casting choice. They really deliver.
And I think that's for a few reasons. One, casting someone like Zendaya, who is very lovable and well known and has done a lot of things that people know her and already like her for, right? Like being MJ in Spider-Man and being in like a Disney show and being in Euphoria. Like she's got such a pull towards her. And for her to be so small in this one and in this movie specifically and be like, this is like the setup for her role in the second one. So it kind of makes you fall in love with this character. Like, I really like the character Chani just simply from this movie, just because it's Zendaya. Right? Because we don't get a lot of her because this is only half of the story. So it brings that to it. The director also said that Timothée Chalamet did not audition for this role for Paul.
Really?
Yes. I don't know how to pronounce the director's name, but he knew he wanted Timothée Chalamet in this role.
Interesting.
And I'm not upset about that because he does do a really good job. And I think he was like perfectly cast. He felt like he brought a youth, but also this like old soul to the role, which I think was really smart. And I also just think
that is sort of, he has more range, but I feel like that's becoming sort of
his niche.
Yeah. That the Bob Dylan movie's coming out soon, and that seems like the very similar energy in a weird way to me. Yeah,
that's true. Well, I think what makes him so strong, especially in this role, is it could be very like boring and straightforward and brooding, and I'm the chosen one. But he brings so much like uniqueness and silliness to it. There's just some really just small things he does that make the movie feel, the character even, everything feels so lived in because of his choices. And I think this is like the definition of whisper acting. This movie's so good at that with like, because so many, I feel like a lot of movies and TV shows where they're like, we are serious. We're very serious. So we do this like whisper acting where it's more about how we say it and the intensity we say it at, but we're whispering instead of what we mean and why we're saying it. And I think this is like how you do whisper acting and it actually be good and entertaining and connected to the text and have stakes and it's important, you know?
For sure. That's really interesting. Yeah, because they were very quiet in the movie, but I was never like, oh God, here we go.
Right.
But I think that's a couple things. I think, like you said, they are connected. I feel like it's a motivated choice. I also think in this world, every character we've met, aside from like the Fremen and stuff, are like very high on the political chain. So every breath they take is being monitored by countless people, right? So every step, like they put on a front when they leave their house. So this like whispered, almost like false voice makes a lot of sense to me. Like you need to be careful of every single, like every syllable, how you say it. So that like, it just fits. Whereas like other shows who imitate that, there's not like a reasoning behind it. That's just like what's popular to do.
Well, I also think if you like look even more so, Paul's character starts as like wide-eyed. His dad even like tells him like you're gonna sit in and you're gonna learn. So he's not only learning to be the Duke one day, but he's also learning about the Fremen. And so I think we learn this world through Paul's eyes, which I always love. That I think that's a great way to do it.
Sure.
It naturally gives exposition for the audience because the character needs it as well. But it also, I think, he feels very much in the background a lot of the time, and people are talking about him a lot. And so I think that really plays into it, that he he is not the forefront, but he's being pushed into it by like his mom and these prophecies.
Yeah.
So I feel like it makes a lot of sense for him to feel sort of behind everyone else. I think that's like why the whisper acting works as well. But then also like the Bene Gesserits, that's their whole MO, is to be like not seen. It's like they're playing chess, but they're
Whispers
actually
in the shadows type deal.
Right. They don't want you to know they're the ones pulling all the strings.
Yeah. And there are characters who are not doing that. Specifically, Leto comes to mind, who is very all cards on the table, very forward, like I will do what I say and I say what I mean.
Right.
Duncan Idaho, who's like, he's a good guy, but he's like soldier mindset.
Right.
Like he's not thinking big political moves. So
or
he
Gurney
just talks.
Even too.
Yeah, Gurney, you know?
And then of course the Harkonnens.
Yeah.
They're just like a brutal group of people who are, they don't seem to be very like, I guess they do have like tactfulness to them, like cleverness to them. But to me, they scream more like, we are like fighters. We're gonna like muscle our way through things, but they also are
they're
smart.
tactful enough to drop a bomb on someone.
Exactly,
you know?
exactly. So yeah, like that segues into where we're at in the movie is Paul is learning about the Fremen specifically. And this was another example of how they use transitions. So he's learning about the Fremen and how they were colonized essentially. And he's having these visions of the Fremen or we're seeing his visions. And then it transitions to the Emperor's, it's like his people. It's not him yet. We don't meet him in this movie.
Caravan.
Right. Are flying to House Atreides. And it's just, again, it's cool. We go from like who the Fremen are to who their oppressors are. And that segues into them landing on Caladan, which is House Atreides' home planet. And it's just and it talks about how they use the spice to travel in this moment as we literally see a spaceship flying that has to use the spice to travel. Yeah.
It's really cool because it like, again, in not a whole lot of words, Paul's listening to these like educational tapes or whatever. And it like not in an ominous tone or anything. It's just like spice is used for space travel, which makes it by far the most expensive thing in the universe.
Right.
But they decide to show us this ominous space, like this enormous ship in the sky, which by the way, every spaceship design was so cool in this movie. It was really cool. Every angle they used to like show the ships just made them look so big and real and awesome. It was so cool. And this leads into just more, I think, really cool balance of dialogue giving us what we need and then visuals showing us the like sparkles on top,
like the depth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even just like cool stuff that is cool, but like doesn't really matter a whole lot. Like not Gurney, but who's the other guy who like does the eyes in the back of his thing?
I don't remember his name.
Thwar, something like that. He's like an advisor to Leto, right?
Yeah.
And the Emperor's ship like lands down and they're processing in, and Leto asks how much does it cost for them to travel here? And he just like rolls his eyes and he's like $1.4 gazillion or whatever. And again, like that's never explained. But it's just cool. Like, it's neat, you know? I think in the books it is. Like, they're specifically really, really good at math. I think that's it.
I think because this was an IMDb trivia thing. Okay. And what's also cool about the world is, like, we can talk maybe a little bit about the technology. So there is no, like, AI in this world, right? Like, there is no, like, supercomputers or things like that.
And that's because there was, like, on Earth original, like, there was an AI uprising, right? And then everyone decided no AI, and that's when we started space traveling.
Right. And so that's why like all the ships have to be flown and why like we don't see computers basically.
Which is super cool.
And so this was like an IMDb fact, but basically those people, the Harkonnens have someone on their side is like that as well. They are kind of like the supercomputers of this world. And because there aren't actually supercomputers, but these people are like them, which again is just really cool.
Yeah.
It's if you told me this came out right now and it was like this creative, I'd be like, yeah, that's never been done before. Even though it's older and so many things have been based off of it, I still feel like it is so unique.
Yeah, it's so fresh. And I think part of that is everybody's like fresh take on it, right? Like this director, Hans Zimmer did the score, all these young actors coming in, like they put their own spin on everything, obviously. But the source material is just like, of course it's standing the test of time. This thing is great, you know?
Yeah. Well, because at its core, it's just like it's like a chosen one story, but it honestly, it takes the chosen one story and kind of flips it on its head, which again is really creative.
It takes it on its head. And something else I noticed, because I was through my notes, I decided, I was like, I'm just going to try to map out the hero's journey on this, because I bet it happens. And I quickly got overwhelmed because it's like 7 different stories happening at the same time. Because like at one point I was like, oh, this is the refusal of the call. Wait, no, now he said, oh, he definitely said no in this scene. And I'm like, okay, that's because he's refusing like 5 calls.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is it's like layered. He's got so many. It's very good.
It's really cool. Which is like the whole thing. Like they've been crossing these bloodlines, and Paul is just one of these bloodlines that like 8 things are lined up for him to do. So like pick your poison, I guess.
Because then like adding on to that, the Bene Gesserits, how they control people is by creating these prophecies, right? So they go to places and they say, someone from our line will be literally the Messiah. We will create the Messiah. Yeah. And because of that, they're like revered as, for sure, as like amazing people. Yes, they have like powers and stuff. So they are very important. But if you think like, it's like Mother Mary, right? Like you're going to be like, yeah, we're going to take care of her. And like, I guess in the books, did they help create the Lisan al-Gaib, or was that all like native to Arrakis and the Fremen?
No. So the Bene Gesserit across every planet put their own Messiah myth in play. And they did that to basically just protect themselves. Right. So if they ever find themselves in danger on that planet, they can be like, I'm a Bene Gesserit. My line's producing the chosen one. You should probably not kill me. Right.
Wow.
And when Paul goes to Arrakis in this movie, they start spreading that to make sure, because I think at this point, everybody except House Atreides knows that House Atreides is about to die.
Yeah, that's the next thing I want to talk about. Including the Reverend
Mother. Like, I know they do the scene where she she knows. Everybody knows, because the Emperor planned this whole thing. So I think what the Reverend Mother is trying to do is make sure that Jessica and Paul stay alive, even though Arrakis is about to get bombed, right? So like if the Fremen find them specifically, like we will not touch them. You know?
Yes. Yeah, I do think just about everyone knows what's going to happen. And you even Leto knows, sort of. He doesn't know the end game, that it's going to be this full overtaking, but he's pretty sure they're being set up to fail.
Well, he even talks with Paul. He's like, there's a war coming.
Right.
So he thinks this honorable bloodshed is about to happen.
Right. To save the Fremen. He views himself as like he's saving them.
And then the Harkonnens are like, nope.
Right. So basically in this next scene, the Emperor's people gives Arrakis to the House Atreides. And House Atreides is like a very noble and powerful house. They're like at the top, you know?
I think they're based on like Rome or something.
Gotcha. Okay.
And like bullfighting is super important. They had a ton of imagery about that.
Which we can come back to that in a second. Because I do want to talk about that. But they are like very powerful, and also like the Harkonnens are very powerful, but that's because they've been mining the spice for 80 years. They're immensely
rich.
Right. And so it's a big deal that Arrakis is being given to House Atreides, which I literally hate like saying given to House Atreides, because it's like, it's not
the stolen land is now your stolen land.
Exactly. Yeah. But like that's like what
that's and that's the point too, right?
Is. Even like Leto seems like very hesitant about it. And he's like, everyone is trying to get Paul to realize how important what's happening is and how big of a deal it is. And I think they did such a good job in this scene to feel everything feels so intense and like ominous. And I think even this scene, there's so many like stolen glances. Like the Reverend Mother and Paul and Jessica, and
it's honestly like an awkward family reunion.
Right.
Like everybody's just looking at each other and they're like disappointed, and like nobody's having a good time at all.
He like barely wants to even like give his seal on the ring, and he's like, that's it then, right? And the guy's like, yeah, that's it.
That's it.
And it's like, we as the audience don't know. House Atreides doesn't really know, but like this is the beginning of the end for them.
That guy knew.
Yeah, I mean, he said that's it, because that's it. That's the end of House Atreides with that signing over. But they can't say no.
No,
you know?
Absolutely not.
Because the whole point is the Emperor is sabotaging House Atreides.
Yeah.
He wants to have the Harkonnens destroy House Atreides.
Yeah.
And I guess that's because he feels they're getting too powerful.
Yes, which is, I thought, like, I've never really thought about this before, but like, the character of Leto is explored in the way we were talking about, where like not a lot of words are being said, but there's so much depth in the actions that are happening. Like they come down this like royal procession thing, this very formal thing, and they're like, the emperor commands you to do this, do you accept? And he doesn't say yes. He says, we have never denied assistance from that. Like, that is who we are. That's what we do. Which again, just like shows that Leto is like, if anything, a man of his word. Like, honestly, he's like the Ned Stark of this movie. Like, he's just too good to live in this world because everybody's backstabbing him, but he doesn't look behind his back, you know?
Right.
But what's cool about that is, in thinking about this, you're exactly right. House Atreides is super powerful, but I think they're powerful because of like actual like fighting power. Like even other planets are like, oh, Duncan, Idaho, Gurney, Halleck, they've been like, they're training the bet. Like even the Sardaukar are like hesitant to go against them.
Yes, which the Sardaukar are the emperors.
Yeah.
Fighting men, yes.
So I think Leto is a military leader first and foremost. Like he did not get to where he is by making political deals. He was like honest and he was really good at fighting people.
Okay.
So when he gets into this political thing, it makes total sense that he just trusts everybody because he's never had to think like that, you know? Very much kind of like Ned Stark, right? He was raised as a warrior, which I do think, like being raised as the Duke, he was like raised to rule. But I think his way of ruling is just very honest and not forward thinking to the actual dangers around him.
I also think, adding on to that, how he views the Fremen as an ally is both a good and a bad thing, because Leto feels like he can go and make an alliance with them. And I think he probably thinks he's doing a, quote, good thing, which he is. I mean, the Harkonnens are terrible comparatively, but like he still is taking stolen land, basically. And so I think it's just really interesting to see the depth of that character being this. He is the good guy. He's a good guy, but he literally later in the episode, or in the movie, he to Stilgar's face says that like, this, I own this place, basically. And it's like Stilgar being the like Fremen, one of the Fremen leaders. And so it's just, I think it's just that character to me is exploring the theme so well.
I think it's the epitome of like a good person in a like flawed system.
Right.
Can't really
be good.
You know, if there were enough of them, it'd be great.
Yeah.
But like, you know?
Exactly.
The other thing I like is the bull sort of metaphor stuff. To me, that reads very much as like they will face everything head on, which is exactly what Leto does, you know?
Yes.
I forget if they explain this more in the books. I either read it in the books or like read it somewhere that like they were based on the like Roman Empire and things like that. Very like formulaic plans. And I forget what the bullfighting specifically was from, but I like that to me is what I grabbed from it.
I would
like,
think it would also mean like stubborn and like,
exactly.
They use the bull, yes, like bullfighting, but also they use the bull specifically as their like this motif.
Exactly.
And so I feel like they view themselves like in both ways, both as like the fighter and the bull, like they take things head on.
Yeah.
And they're like, they will not be moved, right? Like they're stubborn and they won't be forced out. And I feel like
so like instead of saying like, no, I don't want Arrakis, he says, I will find a way to make this work,
right?
You know?
And he even says that later, like those exact words, because that's kind of what he does. It's just, I think it's very interesting. His character is really well written. We meet Duncan, Idaho. He lands, and this is like such a cute example of this. The movie also does great at adding humor into it, and I think that's easy to forget in such like a big story and such a dramatic and intense story.
Yeah.
And they give not only like other people humor, but like they give Paul life and joy and humor. And like Duncan, Idaho is like another good example of who gets humor in the show. And I think that keeps it entertaining as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, it doesn't, helps it just not to be boring, because like we are chuckling, and I think the second movie even takes that to another level.
I think so.
With like humor, and so we'll talk about that when we get there to the next one. But
it's just like in terms of story, story is always the most important. But for a story to be effective, it needs to be relatable, right?
Right.
I can't relate to this. Like if you just told me the story of the Atreides house, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. But because this is Paul's story, I'm invested, you know?
Yeah.
So it's finding those little moments. And again, I think they do a good job. Like Duncan and Paul don't even talk to each other that much. But I was like, of course they're long friends and they respect each other and it's great. And I'm going to be really sad when something happens to one of them, you know?
Right. Right. And and then they use the humor to show they care about each other too. So it's not only just an entertaining device, it's a tool to bring characters together.
It's good. And it's quick and it's effective.
Right.
So because there's I don't know, I counted, I think there's 800 characters in this movie. So like anytime I can like remember one of them, like they did their job.
And I think that is another reason why the casting is so good, is because I might not remember Paul's name. I mean, I probably will, but I'm gonna remember like, oh, that's Timothée Chalamet.
One of his names.
Right. Or like that's Jason Momoa.
Yeah.
You know? So it's not these unfamiliar faces that I'm trying to give names to.
Honestly.
It's these actors that I know, and I can be like, well, Zendaya's character doesn't really like this. And that's easy. It's easier to follow because I'm looking at familiar faces.
I think they did that. I think the colors and the costuming did a really good job of that. Like the Sardaukar, the Emperor's Guards being like white is very like, oh, I know those are the bad guys, you know? Or like the Fremen having just the still suits or like the cloth draped around it, like they look so distinct. I'm never confused on like who I'm looking at.
Right. So Paul wants to go to Arrakis with Duncan now because he's been having these visions, and this is like setting up where he sees Duncan dying, and he feels like if he had been there, he'd been alive. And this is it's just all foreshadowing, but it's good to see like Paul's visions coming true. And did you want to say anything else?
No, I mean, Duncan says like, that's cute, but like what happens in real life is what's important. And I thought that was a really interesting line to have in this movie.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that is very clearly not the case.
Yeah.
You know, like the visions and everything are, and I guess you can make a case throughout the entire time, his visions are not set in stone. And that was another thing I read on Reddit. Like he can see the future, especially as we progress through the story. But until sort of the very end, nothing is really set in stone. Like he can see a future. And then if somebody chooses to do something else, that doesn't happen anymore. Right. Which I think is neat. Like the future is sort of always changeable, which usually is not the case. Usually it's like the future is set and then you try to prevent it and that ends up causing the thing. So I think, again, this for like 1965, it's just a cool way to like, you can see the future, but that won't always be the future. It's just, I don't feel like that's done as much, which is cool.
Yeah, it is. Part of it is also because Bene Gesserits can only see the past, right? But Paul is special, and that's what makes this prophecy special, is because this person, this chosen one, will be able to see the future as well. And that's part of that is why like the men don't have men in their line of people, right?
Yeah, cool. I think like the ending prophecy, because I may be butchering this. I'm pretty sure Paul grows up to have a kid. This is in like the third or fourth book, and the kid is actually like the chosen one. And his thing is that he just can exist outside of time. So he can like be present throughout all past and all future, which is just like bizarre, you know?
That's crazy.
It gets real weird towards like as the books keep going on.
So this next scene is really cool. It's in a graveyard, basically. And Paul is talking to his dad. And I think this scene makes you really like Leto as a character.
Oh, yeah.
It's also very interesting that it's in a graveyard. And basically, again, we're just trying to make it clear to Paul how important everything is. And Paul says something like, well, or Leto says like they're in danger because of all the politics and everything going on. And like we need to protect ourselves or whatever. And Paul says, how are we going to do that? Put the Fremen in their place? We wouldn't be better than the Harkonnens. And then Leto says, no, we'll make an alliance. And I just think, again, that like goes back to the theme. Like this scene isn't crazy important, but we get this idea. We start to get this idea of how Paul feels about what is happening to the Fremens here, I think. You know, like he doesn't agree with this idea of taking over their planet, even though he is adding to it in some ways.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and I just think we see that, we continue to see that throughout the movie.
Yeah, I think the other big thing is, at least this time around, I remember this scene feeling like a very distinct turning point to me. Because we haven't had the meeting with the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother yet. So we like Paul isn't going on his like existential thing. But I feel like this sort of opens his eyes, because the meeting ends with Leto sort of talking to Paul, being like, I didn't want to be the Duke either. Like I wanted to go off and be a pilot and this and that. And they have this like really cool heart to heart. And he says, if you do say no, you'll still be all I ever needed you to be, my son. which like one, super cute. That's adorable. Second, knowing what happens, that sucks, right? Because if Paul was just this guy's kid, he'd probably have a much better life. And I think that's what starts the separation of him as Paul and him as his mother's project in his mind. You know?
Well, because what happens is in Dune 2, part of why he chooses to take on this prophecy and to manipulate the people, the Fremen people, is to honor his father.
Exactly. Well, so it's cool because they like split up and he's having this internal struggle. And at the end, he like fuses them back together and it's just like the worst way.
Right. And
which
so
is super cool.
To have this scene, that's what I mean by the two movies go so well together. To have this scene, because he even says in their memory, give it a try. Give being the future of House Atreides a try.
Yeah.
Which is so funny because like that's what he does, right? In Leto's memory, that's exactly what he does. He leads the Fremen to like bring back House Atreides.
Yeah, Leto even says like a war is coming, and I was like, I guess you're right. Just like
you're looking at
the sides are a little different than what you're thinking.
Yeah, it's very good. And so the next scene we learn about shields, which these shields are such a cool idea because we don't really have like a ton of guns, and that's partially because of these shields, right?
Yeah. So the shield effects look very, very cool. They're explained super quick again by Gurney. So you turn them on and they're like this blue glow, and only slow moving objects can pierce them. So that effectively like bullets don't work, like nothing moving fast works on anybody. So they've developed a fighting style where you're very up close with swords and stuff. You need to swing and then slow down your strikes to actually pierce, which is like, I do remember this from the books. They go into vivid detail with the fighting in the books because like when they get to Arrakis, they don't use the shields because it's vibrations and it makes the worms and everything. So when Paul fights Jamis for the first time, he's like purposefully slowing down his swings, which makes Jamis more able to dodge. So it's like all this added tension because Paul's actually a really good fighter. He's just like purposefully moving slowly, which he needs to like figure out.
It's like muscle memory.
It's very cool.
That is really cool.
And like that's cool. And that's a pretty easy concept of shields. But again, as they're using the shields in real time, Gurney's like, you need to be slow to hit. And that's literally all he says. And that's all we need.
And I feel like this is something, the language is so specific to this world. And I think the actors are so genuine and so believe themselves so much that it doesn't stand out to me. Like he says, quote, the slow blade penetrates the shield. And two things. One, that's like a heightened way to say it.
Yeah.
And two, it's like he knows this already. Like we all know this except us, the audience sitting there. So I think they just did a really good job of slipping these in, not making it feel like a big deal, but giving us enough information to understand it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's very character motivated.
Right, to like
Gurney is like a very religious guy, so that feels very much like a sort of it is what it is type of thing. You know, like of course he's going to speak in that sort of flowery kind of language, which is very cute. We also get the scene when he walks in. Paul says, "I recognize you from your footsteps," which comes back later, which is really cool. But it's great. Another like all they do actually is like fight. But immediately I'm like, oh, they like each other. Like they care for each other. What a cute relationship. And I feel like that's a mix of one, the storytelling of the characters is very obvious. And two, the actors, the performances is just really like their chemistry. I get it. Like y'all have known each other for years. It's great.
So then the next scene we meet Vladimir, which I think that's kind of funny. That's his name.
Oh yeah.
How is this character the Baron? How is he described in the books? He's described like slug-like, right?
Yeah, I think so. He's like big. He like I didn't realize this the first time seeing the movie because his like cloak is really long. He like floats.
Right.
He flies. I just thought he had really long legs.
Can he? Oh, did you really? That's funny.
I was like, that's a weird design.
Can he do that in the books?
Yeah, it's so under his cloak he has like machines that do it for him. I'm pretty sure. Like I don't think that's a power he has. I think like because without he like. At the end of the second movie, Paul like cuts off his thing and he like falls. Like I don't think he can support himself without his machines, but his machines make him fly.
And that's what's on his back.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Before I forget, this is another cool transition.
Oh, okay.
They're fighting and Gurney goes, "You don't get it." Again, like this is the third or fourth time that somebody's been to like, Paul, listen, we're in danger. So like me as an audience, the first time I'm like, I think Paul's in danger, you know?
But also I'm like, I'm right there with Paul. They do such a good job to make you feel like Paul, because I'm like, what danger? How much danger could we really be
exactly.
in? And then when you get to it, it feels, and I'll talk about like when we get to that plot point, but it makes the like utter destruction of House Atreides painful, because
Absolutely.
It's like was almost preventable,
yeah.
but it wasn't, and they tried so hard to do their best, and like every single person like cared so much and knew that it was gonna happen, but also didn't know, and
they
like
didn't know it was gonna be like that. Yeah,
right. And they were trying so hard to keep it from happening, and like even Leto feels like if part of it is to keep himself safe, well, if he can just mine the spice, then that'll keep them safe.
Yeah,
that'll keep House Atreides safe. And
for sure. Yeah, it's great.
It's great.
But the transition, he's like, you don't get it. We're in so much danger. You haven't met the Harkonnens. I have. They're brutal. And then we cut to Getty Prime, the homeworld of the Harkonnens, which is just like,
yes.
Damn. And like, I forget if this is not in the books. They did a different thing, because I think the Harkonnens are like kind of problematic in the books. They're overtly homosexual in the books.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like it's portrayed in a bad way. Like it's bad to be. So they nixed that.
Okay.
And what they decided to do was make them super brutal, same as the books. But their whole thing is like the world they live on is not colored.
That's so cool.
Which is just who in the writing room got a raise with that one,
right?
You know, like it is wild. And I feel like it really comes to fruition in the second movie.
It does, yeah,
with the arena scene. But it is just crazy. It is awesome. It's so different, and it sucks the color and the life out of everything. Like I get it. Like these are the villains, you know,
right? Because we go from the Atreides people and to obviously on Arrakis.
Well, and it's like, Caladan is full of greenery and rain and all these beautiful landscapes, and then you get the mime clown from the Powerpuff Girls. Like it's literally like, oh my god,
it helps break up the monotony of Arrakis, because we're on Arrakis so much, but it helps like bring a whole different palette to it, like from warm to cool. It's just very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's the character's name? The one you don't like.
Fade Roth is the other one.
No. The one that's in this movie.
Yeah.
David Bautista plays him.
Yeah.
He is the nephew of the Baron.
Yeah. Let me look it up.
It doesn't matter that much. But all I'm saying is he is upset about
Robin.
He's upset about Arrakis being taken from them. And this is like another hint. Their like supercomputer guy basically says, well, don't be so sure that this was out of love for House Atreides. And it's just really cool. It's all foggy. And the Baron goes, the Emperor is a dangerous, jealous man. And he's like wiping away tears. Right?
I thought it was like sweat.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, never mind then.
Yeah, because if I gained anything from this movie, it's that like, I don't know, I don't think Vladimir Harkonnen like really cares about anything,
this makes more sense. Okay,
especially when we learn that like as a treat, his family members get to like kill each other in an arena, you know?
Right.
I did write down at this point that I hate Dave Bautista's acting in this, and I don't want to say I hate Dave Bautista. I think he's great. He's a very fun guy. I like him in Guardians of the Galaxy.
You just don't like his choices for this role.
I think when he's surrounded by so many people who are giving such fully developed, depthful performances, and all he does is yell, it really bothers me. Yeah. And I don't have anything wrong with him being like a hot-headed character, but he literally, the first time we saw him, aside from the very beginning where he just stands there silently, is shouting. And everyone's like, oh God. And I'm like, great, we have nowhere to go to, you know. His character doesn't really develop a ton after that. In the second movie, you see like his relationship with his cousin, and that's cool because he's sort of like humbled in his place a little bit. But again, I just feel like it's a missed opportunity, because until we have Fade Rotha in the game, we've got Vladimir, who's like the main baddie, but you're also not going to see him on the field, right?
Yeah.
So Robin to me is like the epitome of Harkonnen battle, right? Like he is a fighter. So having somebody who's like angry, but angry in like a unpredictable kind of crazy way is very fun to me. But all he did was yell.
I agree. I think that's kind of like a pet peeve of mine, because I think how often do people really like yell, you know? And it's also just kind of the most, that's a very juvenile acting choice. And like, that's something that as an actor, you look at and think, what is it's the most basic choice, it's the easiest choice, it's the most boring choice. And it also, when everything is yelled, so if every line is yelled, or even if every other line is yelled, the audience tunes out because they're bored, because it's the same thing, and it doesn't have any like, to get something out of someone, yelling is like not the best way to do it. And that's like what acting is trying to figure out how you can get what you want from someone. And so it's just juvenile acting choices. So it's weird that he's making these choices. And I feel like maybe he was directed that way because they wanted to give nuance to, like, the Baron is so like slimy in the way he talks, and like I think he's a fully realized character. And then House Atreides is like very different. And I think they're trying to make him feel evil, but different. And I think, I just don't think it was done as well as it could have been.
You can make an argument, like, again, sort of in the same vein as Leto. Like, he is not a forward thinking kind of guy. Like, if he's angry, he's just going to be angry and yell. It just, I don't know, it just doesn't vibe with me, especially in this movie. Like, it just feels out of place.
I agree. I was able to like tune it out and not care as much and just go with him more.
I mean, he's only in the movie for like 5 minutes, so it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's true. Well, because he does it in the second one too.
He does it. I remember
a lot more,
being
even
much more upset in the second movie.
So the next scene, the Bene Gesserits are here, which this was crazy. This was crazy. The music, the chanting.
Yes. As we said in the beginning, like the music, colors, scene design, like it's all phenomenal the whole time. We just assume we said that for every single scene.
Right. Jessica wakes up Paul, and there's so many creative things. Like the mom goes, Paul, but we don't hear the mom say it. We hear and cut to Chani saying it. And it's just so good.
It's good.
It's very cinematic. I feel like this movie did a great job of making everything as cinematic as possible.
Yes.
And basically the Reverend Mother's here to hear about Paul's visions and kind of test him. And we also meet Dr. Yue, which is very important. He checks his vitals, which is cool because he did it without any like machines. He just did it himself.
Again, like not explained either. Like this is the first time we're hearing of Dr. Yue, and I'm already like, okay, family doctor. Great.
Sure,
he can feel your pulse or whatever. That's
exactly.
Awesome.
He warns Paul, and this is very interesting. That's Dr. Yue that does this. Warns Paul that the Bene Gesserits, basically, they have their own agenda, which is very true.
I said that is crazy that you just said that.
But yeah, as you know, at the end, he's the reason for their demise. So him warning Paul was very, very like, it's just good. It's like cool. It's not necessarily foreshadowing, but it's just kind of almost like irony.
Yeah. So
then Paul goes into the room. And this is like another example. We keep seeing like the decorations of the bowl. And I just think, it's just supposed to continuously represent the house. And it's all creepy. And she uses the voice on him. And
creepy as shit.
And the first time I saw this was like the scene I went to the bathroom, which when I was watching it this time, I was like, this was a terrible scene. I mostly missed the scene where like Jessica explained everything afterwards about like the prophecy and this and that. So I like missed a huge chunk of it, and I was kind of like laughing about how important it is that I missed it. So
that's really funny.
She has him put his hand in the box. This is like, I feel like people understand. This is pretty straightforward. And then she has the needle with the poison. She's testing him to see what he's gonna do and if he's impulsive. And she says, if an animal will gnaw off its hand if it's trapped, what will you do? And this is the first moment we get Jessica saying, fear is the mind killer. Yes. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. It's the time. And this is like, is this straight from the book? I think it is. I think it's just a little bit shortened.
So iconic.
Because it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And I think this is great. Jessica's character goes through such a transformation. And actually, a lot of characters do. Paul does as well. And I think it's cool because this movie is a lot about where they started, and this Jessica being like crying and almost feeling powerless at a lot of points and just so unsure of what she's going to do. Maybe that's part of why Paul sees the future in an unsure way, because Jessica's such a big part of what's going to happen. And she almost feels like she hasn't made her mind up. So to see her like sobbing outside the door was like, whoa, because I still have Jessica in my mind of who she was in the second movie.
Yeah.
And so this actress, to see her go from this to that, it's just so well done.
Well, and I think it's cool because there are moments in this movie where Jessica is a total badass, right? She is like killing people left and right. She's taking names. And I feel like it's very clearly like the two sides of her, like the one, like the Bene Gesserit side, where everything's under control and she's calculating and she's been trained to deal with everything. But anytime Paul is even in the slightest danger, she starts to panic.
Yes.
Which is like
the mother side.
Exactly. Right. Which is cool because like it is very easy for Jessica to just be like this stone cold killer kind of character. So to give her these scenes where she like genuinely just cares about her child,
right,
does so much to fully realize her actions, you know?
Yes.
Whereas as they keep both making mistakes, you just keep understanding why.
Right. Well, because Paul also very much views this idea, what she's done, he horribly resents it. He feels like he's just a project to her.
Yeah. And even at the beginning, she's like, use the voice. He's like, I just woke up. Like, I don't want to do this.
He doesn't want this. So yeah, it's interesting to see her like fighting between those two people she has to be. And Leto even asks her about it later. Mm-hmm. And I think Paul really sees that as well. And he sometimes misses even the mother side. Like he doesn't get to see this part, you know? We're seeing these visions of Arrakis. The song is really cool. And go ahead.
In the book, like the thing in the hand, I'm pretty sure it goes into like crazy. He feels like his hand is melting or like it's on fire. Like it's like intense pain. And very like viscerally described, which is cool. So it's like a big shock when like his hand's totally fine.
Yeah.
Because it was like the idea is that it's another Bene Gesserit thing. Like all that was induced by like mental something or other, right? Like nothing happened to him, but they can like manipulate your senses to make you think that happened, which is just another cool thing that they can do.
Mm-hmm. And so she basically explains, she says, we sift people. She says like sand, we sift people. And she's trying, I just thought that was such a cool way to put it. And she's trying to understand basically Jessica and Paul and know more about them. And I think it's cool because I think you're right. She knows at this point where House Atreides is going. Mm-hmm. And I guess she's trying to decide if they're worth saving. Yeah. I guess from this moment, she decides they aren't. They're worth honoring, but to her, they're not worth letting live. Right? Wouldn't you agree that's what she gains from this?
Yeah, because we see later when she's talking to Vladimir, she's like, at least give them like exile, right? Mm-hmm. So it's one of those like, you won't be killed immediately, but you'll like probably die, you know?
Basically, she tells him that I need to see if you can control yourself. You've inherited too much power. And he says, because I'm a Duke's son. And she goes, you're Jessica's son. You have more than one birthright, boy.
Stupid boy.
It's so crazy. I just thought that was really good. And he tells her about his dreams of Chani and
then she gives no advice at all.
Nothing. She says, I hope you live.
She says, tell me about your dreams. And I'm like, oh shit, we're gonna find out what these dreams are about. And she tells him, she's like, have you dreamed these often? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, do dreams come true? And he's like,
kind of.
And then she's like, bye.
Right.
I thought that was really funny this time around.
Right. And so her and Jessica, as they're leaving, they have this conversation. And this is where we learn about the Kwisatz Haderach. And Paul was listening. And he learns about it too. And he says, what does it mean I could be the one? And this is where we get the information about crossing bloodlines, bringing about a mind that could bridge time and space for a better future. And she says he's very close now. Some believe he's here. And Paul goes all a part of the plan. And like they're in this like gray smoke. It's night. It's ominous. And just them on these like two sides. They're not in frame together. They're always in frame separate from each other because they're like opposing each other at the moment. And this is like, I mean, if your mom basically tells you I had you because I wanted to fulfill a prophecy, you know, it like clearly it hurts him and he like resents this about her. And this is where I was like trying to decide what motivates Jessica. And you said this earlier. I do think it's pride. I think it's this feeling like she can be the one to bring about this great savior.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
For sure.
Okay. I don't think it's necessarily power or greed. I really think it's just pride.
I think so too.
So then they're packing up to leave for Arrakis, and they're like 33 minutes into this movie. And I feel like we got so much from this movie in like such a little amount of time.
And I don't know how to explain it. Like we are literally just meeting characters and walking around, but I was not for a second bored.
Right.
Because the world is so fleshed out, everything looks so beautiful, the character relationships are so clear. It's just a lot. Like they were like, we need 2.5 hours to let everyone know who is in the story.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad about it.
No, it's so good. So they land, and Gurney throughout this starts saying words of the prophecy, which I never realized this until this time around. That
were they the prophecy?
He says like, my lungs take in the sand, or is it not the prophecy?
I thought they were just like Bible quotes or something.
Oh, okay.
Because Gurney's thing is he's a Christian. Like he's an old earth like Christian.
Gotcha.
And I don't know how rare that is in the world. Like I don't see anybody else doing it. So I'm pretty sure he's quoting like scripture.
Okay, and then later in the meeting is the time he quotes prophecy.
I think so.
Okay.
I don't know.
That makes more sense, I think.
Tell us in the comments.
Yeah, let us know. Why is he saying it there?
I'll read the book again.
So people are like chanting Lisan al-Gaib at him.
Oh,
and
it's so good.
He's not a fan. And and I don't know his name, but the supercomputer guy.
Yes.
He goes, they follow their old master's rule, mandatory attendance. That's Harken and Love right there. And it's like all these small things that tell you about the world as you go through it. You know what it
kind of reminded me of?
What?
Do you know when they get to Jurassic Park and they're like, strap in, it's going to be a ride. Like that's the energy that riding on Arrakis gave me. Because like, oh, it's beautiful, it's vast, it's grand, but like so some shit's about to go down.
Right.
You know?
And we learn that Lisan al-Gaib means voice from the outer world. Paul says that they've been planting superstitions here, that Bene Gesserits have been.
Lisan al-Gaib, voice of the outer world, is specifically the name of the Messiah of the prophecy of the planet Arrakis.
And Jessica says, no, we're just planning the way.
Yes.
And
I just thought about this. I thought about it during the movie. This is not the place to put this, but I want to talk to you about it. This is the last scene we had with Vladimir. Where he's like, oh, we're going to kill Jessica and Paul. We're like, whatever. He says specifically, like, they think they can come in and take my spice, my Arrakis. And he says my Dune. Which
we haven't gotten there yet.
I thought it was neat. Like, spoiler about it, Dune is like the Fremen word for the planet. Which is like a big reveal later. And I just thought that was interesting. Like, why do you think he knows that?
It's been 80 years.
He just like found it?
Probably.
Okay. I don't know. I was wondering, I was like, does that mean anything else? Like, not that he's like a good guy or anything, but I was like, was he also kind of thinking like, maybe we should work with a Fremen or something, you know?
No, I really think for him, it's been about power and green.
Okay. Interesting. Maybe he just wanted to know a lot about like what was his or something.
Yes.
Okay. I was just curious because he said that and I was like, wait a minute. Because that's a big reveal in the second movie.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, continuing.
Paul even says they see what they've been told to see, which is true, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so, like the Reverend Mother said, like we've been to Iraq, we've done all we can.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
So they've been like, hey, do you hear the Messiah's coming to town? You know?
Wow. Okay. Gosh, that's crazy. It's so good. So,
which is another thing that like the prophecy itself, they just intentionally kept it super vague. Okay. So like the prophecy says like the Messiah will come with his mother, but that's like interpreted in a ton of different ways. Like some people are like, oh, the mother's going to come and give birth on Arrakis. Or in this case, it was like, oh, Paul already was born and he arrived here. So like, it's a very wide pool of what could actually happen to be considered within the realm of the prophecy, which I just think is like a neat, again, like whatever the circumstances, it's explained.
Yeah, you know? Yeah. So they fly into like what they've created is this city. And I thought this was cool because we're seeing the city, but it's all kind of it's kind of like plain. Like there's not a lot of color. It's like it's the cinematography is interesting, but I thought something they use music in this to push the plot along and make things interesting. Like we're getting all these cool visuals, but the music sounds so ominous and like there's this impending doom, and it can make these simple scenes of flying somewhere feel really interesting. Like it's not like there's a lot of color or cool lighting even, that it just helps to make these what could be boring scenes feel interesting.
I do remember thinking, because I forget what they did, but it was some like new effect they invented or whatever for like the copter blades twirling. So I do remember seeing the movie the first time because that was new. Like I was enraptured by those. Like I could just watch that thing fly all day and I was like, wow, this is so cool. But speaking of music, another thing that I want to go back a little bit. When they first arrive, the thing like lands down. They're all like, all right, it was so dangerous. They put on their shields and then the bagpipes go off.
Right.
And I thought that was really, really funny. I was like, do the Atreides have like Scottish heritage also?
I guess
like
so.
what's that all about? But again, I think it's cool, like in this Hans Zimmer for the score pulled from a lot of like Middle Eastern sounding music. It's very like Jewish, very like Arabic sounding. It's using specific scales. It's using specific instruments even, right? It sounds like the desert. It sounds like Prince of Egypt, right?
Right.
And I guess if you're thinking like, if I'm going to explain these foreigners are landing, what's the most different I can get? Fucking bagpipes.
That's funny.
Obvious choice. Second thing I noticed this time around, when flash forward, when the whole thing is coming down, when like the House Atreides is falling, Gurney like charges into battle, and his like theme, I guess, is a bagpipe playing, which funny. I thought was hilarious because it's just like all this ominous synth music, and then the bagpipe solo comes in as he's like knocking down people, and that just made me laugh. But I was also like, wait, it's kind of good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think looking back on the score, I remembered all of the Hans Zimmer sounding things, but it's a lot more like variable than I remembered. Yeah. Like there's a lot of different sort of sounds and almost different genres in it, which I think are really cool.
But it's all cohesive.
For sure.
Which is good. We also hear Leto and Gurney call Arrakis a hellhole. And I just thought that was really cool because it contrasts Chani in the beginning calling it beautiful and saying it's beautiful. And I think that really... They were specific with amplifying the theme and like every choice they could make, you know, it's just really good. So then Jessica's choosing a handmaiden. Basically, we just learn about the crisp knife. Is that right? How you say it? And it's just a blade.
Knife, yeah.
What?
Crisp knife.
Crisp knife. And it's just the tooth of a worm. And she brings up the prophecy and gives her the knife. And that just becomes important later. Yeah.
So, yeah, I know one, like, that's cool. You either, I guess, need to, like, find a dead worm somewhere, or you need to, like, take a tooth, which sounds scary as hell.
Right.
But they make these blades, and they're incredibly, like, religiously important to the Fremen. Like, you
can't sheathe them unless they've drawn blood.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Really cool. And this next scene was really cool. One, we see people chanting at the gates, Lisa Nagaib, and Paul meets a man planting palm trees. And I think, are these palm trees in the book, or was this something they created for the movies?
I have no idea.
I don't remember. Okay, because I think it's such good imagery.
Yeah.
So these palm trees aren't indigenous. They say that they aren't indigenous here. They can't survive without him, this Fremen man. They can't survive without them. And each one of these, together, it's 100 lives because it takes so much water a day.
Yeah.
And Paul says, well, shouldn't we remove them? And he says, no, they're sacred. It's an old dream. And I just think this is all a metaphor for what's happening on Arrakis, right? Like these palm trees don't live here. They can't sustain without the Fremen. This is exactly who the Atreides people are, right? They can't, or the Harkonnens even, they aren't indigenous to this place. They can't survive there without the Fremen, and they take things from the Fremen. Like this takes water and life, just like how these people are colonizing them and taking from them as well. And Paul says, well, let's remove them, you know? And they're like, well, he calls it an old dream, which is like prophetic, you know? It's just very, very cool.
Well, that's what I thought of it in the other direction of the Bene Gesserit. Like they planted their seeds here, and now the Fremen literally would rather die than see it like taken away.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Which is super cool. I also think like there are so many little scenes like this where we meet so many this guy never comes back,
right?
The house, like the gardener of the trees, we never see him again, right? We don't know what he's up to, but it's these little interactions where it's like, oh yes, this is a old dream religious thing. Like it makes the world seem so incredibly lived in, because a lot of it is, don't get me wrong, a lot of it is about like Paul being the chosen one, but a lot of it also like kind of isn't. It's just like about all these things. It's about this chosen one and this prophecy and this old text and this thing that means something. And it's just sort of people living lives, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so cool because I don't know. I feel like that gardener was weirdly fleshed out, you know? Like, I feel like I kind of knew who he was.
Yeah. So these palm trees are destroyed when the Harkonnens, like,
yeah, for sure.
And that's what makes me think they represent House Atreides, because they like destroyed with Atreides. Okay. But I like the idea of it also being the Bene Gesserits and planting seeds, and that's really cool too.
And again, like, I feel like it's much like the themes and the criteria for certain things. Like, it's so general, it can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah. So Paul's learning more about the Fremen culture, and he sees a desert mouse here, which this is another right. This is another cool example of just like technology and these projections, and they look really pretty. And yeah, his name later in the second movie, he chooses, what is it, Muad'Dib, which means desert mouse. And we see this mouse like 3 times, and I never realized like how important it is until I've seen the second movie. So that's really cool. It's just great foreshadowing, and yeah, he's supposed to sort of represent Paul.
It's that, because it's like you find out the mouse, it has big ears, so like whatever, I don't know, it has like filters, it makes water for it to like drink. So it's like it's surviving, it's living off the land. It's small
but like powerful.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this like tracker enters.
This thing freaked me out the first time.
It's creepy looking.
They're like it's this futuristic like death needle thing. And if there's anything anything scarier than something moving fast, it's something moving real slow. You know?
Well, because it moves real slow, then it moves real fast.
It burns a little hole in the wall and like flies through. And the sound design was so good. Like, I remember hearing it and I was like, did I hear something? And then Paul's like, did I hear something? And I was like, shit, I'm there, right? And it's this tiny little thing. And you find out later it's like this one-touch poison death thing. And it's just so scary. It's so tenseful.
Well, because then he's in the projection and like one eye is lit up and he's trying not to move because it seems to be that movement attracts it. Yeah. Which they didn't need to tell us that. It just they showed us. And he's got this one eye lit up and he's just standing there with his eyes wide, like, don't blink, don't blink, don't blink. And he's just completely paused while it's like a centimeter away from his eye.
So scary.
I'd be dead. So... And then like a handmaiden comes in and he like kills it.
Yeah.
And we find out that a Harkonnen was cemented into the walls
like weeks ago.
That's freaking crazy.
It. So good.
Then this is where the Bene Gesserits, the Reverend Mother, I should say, is meeting with Vladimir and the Baron. And they're planning to overthrow House Atreides. And this was just like so unnecessarily cool. They have this cone of silence and again, not explained. She says put on the silence, and then it kind of ruined it. We had subtitles going, so like we heard what it was saying, but I remember like watching it in the theaters. The thing came on and they muffled the first like 3 lines of dialogue, so you don't know what they said. Yeah. And granted, they don't mean a ton. They're sort of setting up what we've already said multiple times. Right. But I remember freaking out in the theater. I was like, oh my God, it's so like good. So unnecessarily cool. But it's so cool. And I guess that's just another way they bring you into the world. Yeah. With all these things that you can't really relate to, they help you relate to it. Yeah. And so the Reverend Mother basically says, allow them to be exiled, Jessica and her son, and give me my word. And he says yes. And then the Reverend Mother leaves, which again, it's also like a cone of light for this cone of silence. So it just looks amazing. Oh, yeah. And he basically says when she leaves, he's like, no, don't worry. No Atreides is going to live. Arrakis is Arrakis. Like, we got this. That's when he says my Dune. Yes, that's when he says when it. When he like levitates again. Exactly. Yeah. I feel so dumb thinking he just had really long legs. I was like, I don't know what the Harkonnens look like yet. That's so funny. So this is when we have this meeting, and this is where Gurney quotes the prophecy, because the Harkonnens have been like mining spice to a crazy extreme level. This is like another example of how they're being like set up to fail. And I think this is something I got a lot more on the rewatch, is how they're being set up to fail. And they want to talk to, they basically want to figure it out. They want to talk to the Fremen people and talk to the person overseeing this transition to try to get some help, because it's not going well. And they talk with Duncan, who comes back from the Fremens, and find out there's millions of people and they're great fighters, and they knew he was there for days before. And this is where they bring in Stilgar, who may be my favorite character in Dune. Yeah, he's so good. I guess like in the second movie. Yeah. You know, well, his character was very similar to Zendaya's character for me in this one, where it's like he's there, he wasn't in the visions,
But boy, is he in the second one.
Right.
And not only is he there, he's your supportive weird uncle.
Mm-hmm. So Stilgar is, they kind of set him up to be a little bit funny, but he's like really funny in the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, you take the spice and give nothing in return. And Paul says that's true. And what Stilgar wants is basically leave the Fremen people. Don't trespass. Like, take what you need, take the spice, but don't trespass. And Leto's like, basically looks this man in the eye and says, the Emperor gave me this planet. And that's where I was like, Leto thinks he's doing a good thing, and he sort of backed into a corner. But
yeah, I don't know. I read it the other way. I read it more as like him saying that is like, I am expected to do things from the Emperor on this planet.
Right. But imagine being Stilgar and someone looking at you and saying, this planet that is not mine is mine. Right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it. I don't know. The way I took the conversation, because to me, Stilgar feels like the Fremen version of Leto. Like, they're both actually very honorable, very, like, say what they mean. So when he does say, like, I don't know if I can promise you what you need, but I can guarantee I'll never hunt you. Like, I want this to be a relationship. And he, like, pauses for a minute. He's like, that is honorable. Bye.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying it's not. I just mean, like, from Stilgar's perspective, that still has to be hard.
I get it, yeah.
And it's like we were saying, like a good person in a bad system, it's still hard to be a good person. Like, yes, he's backed into a corner.
Yeah, I guess to me it feels more like Stilgar's just in shock that anyone is immediately not like, let's kill him, you know?
No, 100%. I think so too. I agree. I just think this was the scene that I referenced earlier.
Gotcha, yeah.
Stilgar is about to leave because, yeah, he kind of agrees to it. Like, this is probably the best he's going to get. It's better than the Harkonnens. And he, in his language, he says, I recognize you, about Paul.
Oh.
And I don't know what about this. One, I think the actor who plays Stilgar is just, like, really talented.
Very talented.
And, like, very genuine.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, like, what about this was so, like, oh, shit. You know? I don't know how they did that because it's so subtle.
It is. Like, everything is sort of like, even at the beginning, he's like, this is Stilgar, and he spits on the table. And then we have the fun joke where Duncan's like, it's actually a big, like, happy thing that he did that, you know? His, like, quickness, he's like, that is honorable. I have to go. You know? Like, and that's funny.
And it gets, like, serious then.
Yeah.
You know?
That freaked me out.
I guess that's what it is. It's the contrast between, like, the seriousness and, like, the funny.
Mm-hmm.
So then we meet Dr. Kynes, who is the judge of change. And she...
I think it's very fun that, like, the title doctor is still, like, used.
Right.
You know, like, do you think it's this that you still have to, like, get a doctorate in something, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I really like this character. I think this character is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, they want to go out and see how this is being worked, how the mining is happening, how the harvesting, how the Harkonnens left what it is.
Yeah.
And they get in their Fremen suits. What are they called? What kind of suits are they?
The still suits.
Still suits. And she's checking them. Paul's is like put on perfectly. And she goes, he shall know our ways as though born to them. And at this point I was like, oh yeah, she's like secretly Fremen, right?
Yeah.
And I think when I first saw this, I just always thought she was Fremen because she's like in their outfits and like has the eyes.
Yeah, sure.
But this time around I realized like how cool it is that she both betrayed and saved them because she knew, right? She had to have known what was going to happen to House Atreides.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we find out later she like definitely did because the Emperor said like, I can't say anything.
So for her to be against them and for them, it's just really cool. It's like a duality that this character has. Yeah, well, I think
the cool thing is like she's on the side of Arrakis.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So when these new fuckers come in, she's like, whatever, yeah, whatever you want. And then she like starts the prophecy thing and is this Paul Atreides? Then she's willing to help out. This is another like prophecy thing, by the way. Like she's like, oh, you put your still suit on perfectly. Who taught you how to do that? And he's like, nobody. There can be a couple things. One, he's been like watching the tapes, right? There may have been a tape or something about putting on the suit the right way, and he's just like being humble about it.
Yeah.
Second, in his Bene Gesserit training, if anything, they're acutely aware of their surroundings, right? So just seeing other people in the suits correctly, he probably just picked up how to do things, So it's just cool that it's like, I remember watching it and being like, oh shit, he's the chosen one. But it's like, it's very easily just like explained away.
No, because in the first, when I finished the first movie, I was like, yeah, he's the chosen one.
I'm not being hyperbolic when I say every time a scene like this happened, I would get chills all over my body. Because she'd be like, he knows her way like born to them. I'd be like, every single time.
I recognize you. Lisa Nagaib.
Every single time. Like, it's so good.
No, they got me. I keep having to like check myself and be like, he's not the chosen one.
I Googled this 3 times already. Yeah. He's not the chosen one.
I've seen the second movie. He is not the chosen one.
But then I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, and that's like exactly the point, though.
It's so good.
It's really well done. So they're going into worm territory. They're going to see the crawlers, and we find out the shields like attract them, and I guess that's because of like vibrations. The shields are vibration. That. It's really cool. And there's an issue with one of the crawlers. It can't dispatch it, and a worm is on the way. Mm-hmm. So Leto, being this like very honorable and like good person, is like, well, we're going to save them. We're going to make it work. We're save the people on that crawler. And like, it's down to the wire. This worm is on its way.
This is a tiny thing that I really liked, and I didn't realize it till this time. When they're flying out there, Leto is piloting, which I'm like, he's the Duke. He shouldn't have to. But he said to Paul that like he always wanted to be a pilot.
Oh, yeah.
So he's flying around, and he was like maneuvering. Like, he's good at it too, which I just thought was like not in the grand scheme super important, but it was like a character detail they kept true to things.
That's which cute. Was,
again, and it made me like Leto a little bit more. In this whole scene where he like saves all the people, this again is like one of those obvious, all right, if you haven't figured out by the 5th time, you're supposed to like Leto. He's a good person, you know?
Yes.
Which I think like knowing what happens to him in like an hour, it's clear, like, yeah, you had to spend this time making sure that we knew who Leto was.
Right. I also think this is another, like, good casting moment, because Oscar Isaac is pretty well known. Like, he's in, like, Mandalorian. Is that what it is?
He's in Mandalorian. He's in Moon Knight. He's in Star Wars.
Like, he's in so many things
he's having the time of his life right now.
That people will gravitate towards. Again, it helps you because it's like, I know Oscar Isaac. Like, I like Oscar Isaac.
He was
very
also
likable.
Apocalypse in X-Men.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
So, like, you know him and enjoy him, and I think that is very helpful.
Yeah.
And I kind of think it's cool that the actress playing Jessica is the one that's unknown, because it is like this unknown Bene Gesserit. So it's very
that's
cool.
True. Was she like, has she done anything before?
I mean, definitely she's done stuff, but like, I don't think
nothing
she's
huge.
Yeah, it's not like
that's cool. Is she British? Is she actually British?
Yeah.
Okay. She's great. She's
so good.
Everybody's so good at this movie, except for Dave Bautista.
And they do this cool thing where it's like the sound, it's music. The dragonfly helicopter puts its wing in, and the music like ducks out while the helicopter dives, and it's so good. It's just so good. That's another thing, that they make everything as cinematic as possible.
Yeah.
So Timmy steps on Timmy. Every single time I say Paul, in my brain I have to translate it to Paul from Timmy. Just so you know, every single time. It's so weird how
clearly I see Timothée Chalamet in a still suit when I say Paul.
Timothée Chalamet was the chosen one.
Exactly.
Right. He is the Lisan Al-Gaib. It is him. It's just Timmy. And he sees the spice, and it's like this wave of spice hits him, and he starts having a vision. And he's like on his knees, and they kind of realize that like, well, we gotta get him. And they're even like sacrificing stuff to make room on the helicopters.
Yeah. Well, the whole time, like, Dr. Kynes is like, no, we should just get out of here. The worms, like, the spice is lost anyway. And Leto's like, damn the spice.
Right.
Like, I care about these men. And even like, I don't know, he's literally like a superhero. He's like, how many people are on that ship? She's like 21. And they're like, we can fit 18. And he looks at Paul and he says, we'll find a way.
Right.
I'm like, oh my God, I love him.
So they're like, where's Paul? And it cuts to him just on his knees.
It's good. That's another like sound out thing.
Yes.
They're like freaking out. Where's Paul? Silence.
It's
so
just
good.
him. And the framing is really cool because he's like all the way to one side. It's just very, very interesting.
Yeah,
and
he's kneeling almost like an altar sort of.
Yes,
visual.
that's very much what it looks like. And because he's like, it's the spice, an altar to the spice, you know? And he says, he whispers, I recognize your footsteps, old man. Cut. Gurney's there behind him, grabbing him.
Oh, yeah.
We see the crawler destroyed. We see the sandworm.
Oh, this was like one of the big set pieces of the movie. And it is gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
You said this at some point in the movie, but this was one of those scenes where I was like, I would give anything to be in an IMAX theater right now.
I was like, I wish I was in the movie theater. I'm so glad I
saw it twice, you know?
Yeah, bring it back. Leto, then when they land, they get back to like the city, and he's basically telling Dr. Kynes they've been set up to fail. And she basically says the desert isn't kind to tech, it was old, or technology. And then this is like a moment we see Leto kind of be afraid, you know? And she even goes, the desert is not kind to humans either. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Well, in my mind, this is her still being like, I don't really care about y'all. People, she even says, like, men like you come and go here.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know?
Because for her, it's about Arrakis.
And at this point, I'm like, you clearly don't know my man Leto. Granted, he does die very soon, but it's like, it's not for the reason you think it is.
Mm-hmm. So Paul's being checked out, and basically we just see more visions. And this is where we start seeing like him stabbed. And I think this is like a possible reality that could have happened when he's seeing himself stabbed. But also I think it's like the rebirth.
That's what I thought was neat, because sometimes it's like Chani stabbing him, sometimes it's Jamis, and I do think every time it's like it's Paul dying.
Yes.
Which is just very cool.
And I don't know if it's here when we first see it, but then we also start seeing this visual of blood on hands, and it's just like a literal of Paul feeling like the blood is on his hands of these people, and being this prophecy and what he's going to like lead them into, like the blood is on your hands, and that's literally all we see. And I think that's just really cool.
Every time we saw a vision, I kept thinking, how are they, like, how do I not have an answer to any question, but I'm still so intrigued about it?
Right.
And I really don't know how they balance that, because at some point I would assume that I'd be like, okay, these visions are cool, but now I need answers. And we don't really get the answers until the thing happens, and then you find out the visions were kind of skewed anyway, but it doesn't, like, it's great. It's so good.
Partially because you slowly learn more. Like in this one, they kiss, and she stabs him in this one, you know? He keeps seeing the blade as well, and we know the blade's important.
Or they're like giving us answers in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
Which is very cool.
And we find out Jessica's pregnant, which is a big deal that he knows that, because Jessica doesn't even really know. Like she says, like she just found out. So then we are with the Harkonnens, and it's like raining, and they're like chanting, and I guess it's like some sort of religious thing. And
I think,
or is this the Sardaukar?
This is the Sardaukar.
Okay.
The Harkonnen like guy, math guy, was like confirming their deal.
Okay. And it's all just like creepy, and there's like blood,
really,
and they're
they had
chanting.
like bodies upside down crucifix
like draining
that were
them
draining for the paint. Which again, like, okay, I get it. The Sardaukar
y'all are the bad
messed
guys.
up. Like, fine.
Yeah. And we get it.
They have the like throat singing guy, which like again, like, like, how do we make this more ominous? Yeah, happening.
Right.
Like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Okay, sure. And so then Jessica's crying, and she like gives herself like pep talk kind of thing, gets herself up and ready to go, and she talks to Leto, and he's kind of mad. He's saying like, ever since we've been here, ever since Paul has seen the Reverend Mother, he's not been the same. And he asks, will you protect your son? And he's like, no, I'm not asking you as his mother, I'm asking you as the Bene Gesserit. And I'm like, honestly, probably the Bene Gesserit is going to protect him. He's the Kwisatz Haderach. Like, we're good. And he says, I thought we had more time. It's just really cute to see them. We haven't really seen them together very much. Like, they have a couple looks where they look really sweet to each other, but it's nice to see them like caring about their kid together. Yeah.
Which again is like one of the biggest things about the two of them, because they are not married specifically. Leto is not married. She is like labeled as a concubine. And at the end of the book, which is the end of the second movie, this is different, I believe, from how the movie ends. In the book, like, Chani is also sort of, because he's going to marry like the emperor's daughter, and Chani's also going to be like a concubine sort of deal with his child. And Jessica specifically says to Chani, like, history will remember us as wives, which is like, shit. Because again, it's all not even the power, because like the wife of a strong person doesn't really have the power. It's all about like yes, I am, like, I'm prideful with what I have. It's really cool.
Well, and it's almost like the Bene Gesserit saw that and saw what history does and said, okay, let's use that. Yeah. And it makes it so cool because they know that. And if you are telling the person what to do and they do it and they get the blame, you're free to go on and tell the next person what to do. Yeah. And that's really their MO. That's what they do. So this is like it. This is like the, where we're getting into. I just wrote down
the night.
Right. This is like
this chapter.
It's like huge. This is where it all comes to fruition.
I put bullet point Dr. Yue the betrayer.
Right. And so Paul see how I paused? It's because I had to translate Timmy to Paul. So he gets his sleeping draft, and Leto and Jessica are This is where he says he should have married her.
Very
and
cute.
They're all just going to sleep because it's the middle of the night, and the invasion begins very slowly. So like guards are killed, the shields are down, and then Leto wakes up and he tries to call for security, and he sees that handmaiden stabbed, and then a dart shoots into Leto, and it's Dr. Yue. And this is a pretty big like reveal to me in the theater. I would have never thought it was him.
Well, and again, like we've seen him like twice maybe, and I'm like, how is this still impactful? Like I really don't know Dr. Yue, but boy am I upset.
Because in a few seconds, because it starts cutting back and forth between different things. But like Leto's whole story right here is the dart hits him, and then Yue comes in and tells him like, basically, I'm so sorry, but the Baron has my wife. And he says he takes her apart like a doll.
I know.
And I immediately think I would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And I have no malice towards this man. Like they did such a good job of making you feel awful for him.
Well, and you can tell he feels bad too. Like he did love so these people.
Yes. And he gives Leto a tooth that because Leto's like paralyzed kind of by the dart, and he gives him the tooth, and he says, if you bite down on it, it's going to release this poison. It'll kill you, but it also, if you do it right, it could kill the Baron.
Yeah, which is super cool.
So cool.
And then he's like, I will do my best to like keep Paul safe.
Yes,
you know?
Which he does. He very much helps. As he is the reason Paul continues to live. And so then it's like a full-on attack. The House Atreides obviously starts fighting back, and this is where we get to like the explosions, and it's very pretty. There's like all these blue lights, the blue shields, but then like the orange fire. They made this, because I feel like explosions can get like overdone and kind of boring. They made it look as pretty as it could possibly look.
It's pretty, and it's this really cool idea. So they drop the bombs down and they slow pierce the shields, and then the explosion doesn't escape the shield. So it's like this contained explosion, which is just really fun to look at.
Yeah.
You see all the people running, and Gurney's running. He's like, get to the ships, and then you get the shot of him like as one of the ships falls, he realizes that this is the last stand.
Yeah.
And like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like 2 seconds on screen, but his like whole posture change. He's like, okay, this is like the suicide run of the Atreides. And he's like,
but we're gonna do it anyways.
And it's so good. That's when the bagpipes come in, and he just starts cutting down Sardaukar. Which again, we've seen them once, and I know how strong the Sardaukar are. So it's crazy that Gurney's just taking them down.
I think with it being so beautiful, the music tells us how to feel, because it's like the music is really sad.
Yeah,
like it's very like it's not like this like badass, like crazy, like
no,
it is like sad. It feels like this was inevitable. This was like just, it's like an utter annihilation of a house, of a group of people, and it just feels so sad.
Yeah. And I remember it being a surprise, because you hear Leto talking like, oh, there's something big, a war is coming, we don't know the things, and then it just happens. You know,
right? So
I remember like not being completely off guard, but like sort of the same with like I thought we'd have a little more time.
Yeah.
Which is crazy considering how far in the movie we are.
I know. So then there's this fight, and essentially the Atreides people are like real good at fighting, but there's so many Sardaukar that like they can't help. There's nothing to be done.
Yeah, it's really, so they're like, the Atreides are taking down the Harkonnens, no problem, and then the Sardaukar levitate down from the sky
and fully surround
oh,
them.
Shit.
Right. So, and this is where we see the palm trees on fire. Atreides men are dying on their knees. They put them on their knees, and then instead of like letting them live, they just kill them. It is just it's just an extinction of this house. And Duncan ends up getting away, and he like takes on 3 people, and he like gets in a ship and escapes. And it doesn't even look like, I did it. He just looks so utterly defeated. Which
like does a couple things. One, it's like, it's fun to see Duncan like go off, because he is a great fighter, and he's absolutely cutting down Sardaukar. It made me think about when he was like, oh yeah, I fought one Fremen, I almost died. They're the the hardest guys in the universe. And I'm like, damn, they must be really hard, you know? So like, it's just all these like power scaling things. Yeah, you see Duncan like this same idea, right? Like, if this is gonna be my end, I'm taking as many of y'all with me as I can.
And then really cool. Fire rains down on this city, and again, it's just like, it's really sad. It's very well done. And we're in the ship. Paul and Jessica are tied up. We have this beautiful blue light coming from the windows, but then it's all green. So it's just like
cool.
so pretty.
Yeah.
And she's gagged, and she's kind of like she's gagged, and she is using, we haven't talked about the sign language yet.
I was just thinking that.
But she's using, it's very cool. It's like this own language. Like, it's not real sign language. It's not American. It's not ASL.
It's cool though. She knows it. Paul knows it. At least some of her like guards know it. Which is great. Like, we see it. Is the first time is picking out the handmaiden, right? Picking out shut out.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And like, because Jessica's like, I see a knife in your bodice, and she's like, stand down to the guard. Which again, we use after that. We use it, and it's never explained. We just get the subtitles on the screen, which is awesome because that's like time we saved. Like, it's just a cool thing that happens, and I'm totally on board. And you don't need to convince me that this exists. You know?
She's warning Paul not to use the voice because he's not ready. He does it anyways. And especially because it like starts turning into, of course, it's turning into these evil, awful men talking about like how they're going to assault this woman. And one of them happens to be deaf, which is like kind of a good thing because that meant it's not like 3-on-1, you know, like they can use the voice and end up like working out. But and it's very cool. He like gets them to remove her gag, but then someone else comes by and like only his feet was cut off, and he's managed to like take them down with just, or his like binds on his feet were cut, and he managed to like take them down with just his feet. Like,
it's cool. Like, they're both just kind of badass in this scene.
They are.
Especially Jessica,
right?
Because like the way they do the voice effect is like they take whatever audio is there of them saying the thing, and then they like reverse it and put echo on it and everything, and they just put this like scratchy, ugly voice with Jessica. Like, it sounds pissed off when she uses the voice, and she gives clear instructions too, because like, I don't know, just like the words she'll say, because Paul is like, take her gag off, right? But Jessica's like, kill him, you know? And it's like, oh shit.
Well, because she also will do this thing where instead of like cowering, she meets them. So he's like coming at her with a knife, and instead of like waiting or saying like stop, she just literally, she leans into him and says, kill him. Like, it's crazy because she
really good.
Her having absolutely no fear, this actress like looks like she's no fear, and that's probably part of like how you have to use the voice, I would think. But also it's because she's just like so powerful that once her gag is off, she's like great, she's golden because she can fully control them. So why would she be afraid? And it just adds so much to the scene.
It's good.
So they end up like getting like free of those people, but the ship is essentially like stalled, and
they so the intercom is going, and the Harkonnens are like keeping track, and when they don't hear like correspondence, they lock the ship.
Wow. Okay.
Which is fun. I don't think I realized that the first time. I just thought like the ship stopped for some reason, but I thought that was really cool.
So Yue left them a Fremen kit, which is great, and it's like the only way they could have survived. And they see like all the destruction of the city.
Oh my god.
And now it's cutting in between like Leto and Jessica and Paul in the tent. They create this tent.
Yeah. And
Leto's in the chair with the bull above him. And
above him, he's naked, draped across the chair. I said this also looks like a painting. Like, this is like religious symbol. Like,
yes, absolutely.
Like Jesus in Mary's arms type of deal.
And Vladimir's just eating. Yue comes in. He's like, I jammed their comms. I lowered their shields. I delivered you the Duke. Like, he wants his wife. And he's like, okay, I'll set her free. Just and you can join her. And then he kills him. And it's like, oh, like, you knew that was coming. But like, what else did this Yue have? Like,
and again, like, it's obvious, but it's like, okay, yeah, if you hated Dr. Yue, you're really going to hate this guy.
Right.
You know?
This is where the Baron starts talking about the fall of House Atreides as Paul finds the ring that Yue left for him.
It's very good.
Very good. It's like cutting back and forth between the Baron saying like there is nothing left of House Atreides, as we're seeing the only hope of House Atreides left.
Yeah.
Like coming into this power of being the Duke. It's genius. Leto like mumbles something, and he leans in, he puts his shield on, he leans in, and he says, here I am, and then he releases the poison as like the bull is still like there. They keep cutting to the bull.
Yeah.
And they all kind of like, you know, like it's poison. They all cower, and like he takes his last breath. Duncan lands, and we see Dr. Kynes, and she basically is saying like, I'm commanded to say nothing and to see nothing. And it's like pretty clear that she knew. We find out that Vladimir was poisoned. Everyone else is dead, but he's like able to stay alive because he like floats up into the corner and like, you know, like balls in on himself. And I guess the shield maybe helped too.
Sure, whatever.
But he's not doing well afterwards.
No,
he just survived.
Yeah.
This is like, I think this is my favorite scene, this next scene.
Okay.
and it's them in the tent, and Paul is having their spice in the tent. They realize
which looks so pretty.
It looks so pretty. It looks like glitter.
It's lit by like one handheld flashlight. It's so pretty.
And they realize now that by seeing the ring, Leto is dead. Their whole house is completely obliterated, and Paul starts having these intense visions. He starts talking. He sees like blood on the hands and these holy wars that are unquenchable, and it's a warrior religion that fights for his father. And he says, "A war in my name." Everyone's shouting my name, and Jessica tries to comfort him, and he uses a voice and he says, "Get off me,"
which is sick.
And he's been so kind and when he's upset, he just sort of might mumble something about it. And he yells at her and he says, "You Bene Gesserits made me a freak," and then he says, "My father's dead," and it's like these visions, and he's seeing something like so heavy that he does not want.
And I think at this point it's something he doesn't understand either.
Yes, he just knows that it's like will be blood on his hands. He knows that he will be spreading a war, killing people. I'm sure he can understand like on some level it's wrong is what it looks like, For sure. And he ends up putting the ring on, which is really cool because then the next thing we see is the desert mouse as the sun rises. It's more imagery of like the sun rising, and he is the last standing of House Atreides as like hope.
And that's when we see the little mouse with the water, like he is
surviving, which is what Paul is doing, right? And Paul is the surviving member of House Atreides, and it's just very good imagery. It's really cool.
It's good. Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite scenes too, because it's again like words are not really said, but the way they're like interacting with each other, you sort of see this. Not symbiotic, but like they're relying on each other so much right now. But you can see all the problems that are arising from that,
Well, they're at like their lowest, and these visions, this is like probably the most intense visions of the movie.
I think so.
Because he's seeing this war for the first time, and he like clearly wants it to stop so badly. And it almost hits more knowing he doesn't stop it after seeing the second one.
Yeah.
And like then after this, Duncan finds him and says, "My lord," and like basically like you are the Duke now. The Judge of Change says like she's gonna help him, and I think it's because she believes in the prophecy, and the prophecy basically says that this prophet, this Messiah will bring them to paradise and be good for Arrakis, and I think she believes it is why she decides to help them
for sure.
Because Paul wants her to bear witness. He even says like, "I'll marry the Emperor's daughter." And he goes, "I know you loved a Fremen warrior and lost him in battle." He starts like prophesying about her, like, "I know you walk in two worlds. I've seen your dream."
And this is the first time that I feel like Paul is like taking on this role.
Yes.
Because he is like, he's being prophetic. He's saying like, this is the plan we should do.
He's using that to get what he wants, because he uses those to say, as Emperor, I could make a paradise of Arrakis, which is what she wants. And he's using this Messiah figure that's been put on him to benefit himself. So this is like the first inkling of it. And so then the Sardaukar like come to attack. And I think something else really cool about the Fremen and this being written in the 1960s is the way they fight to me feels like guerrilla war tactics.
For sure.
To me, it's so reminiscent of like the way the Vietnam War was fought. And like, but I guess this was written before it technically, right?
I guess so, yeah.
It's just really reminiscent of it with they use
it's very like native warfare versus colonial.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so, and I guess that's not new to the 1960s. It's just something that is a marker of the 1960s.
Yeah.
With the Vietnam War and like Americans not knowing their surroundings and see what I mean? It just reminds me of that in a really cool way. So it's interesting to me. And this is where like there's the battle in the hallway and Duncan locks them out.
Also, the Vietnam War was long as fuck. It started in 1955.
Okay, so it was.
And went to 1975.
It totally is like that.
Yeah.
With these people using their surroundings in a way that there's no way the others could know that. The Vietnamese people would use their surroundings and use the jungle-like environment.
Really cool.
It makes so much sense for that to be written in the 1960s to me.
Yeah, that's like knee deep halfway through the Vietnam War.
Right. Yeah, this is where Duncan sacrifices himself and the battle in the hallway, and they escape, and Dr. Kynes helps them escape.
This was another like little question I had. So first, again, your last minute idea that like Duncan's just like the coolest guy. He's taken out a dozen people left and right. He gets stabbed through the entire body. He goes down. Jessica says he's gone.
Yes.
Then they run off. Then he gets back up, which in the movie, the first time I was like, holy shit.
Right.
Like, he's unstoppable.
He pulls the sword. We see it. It's gone through his back.
The reveal of it, he gets up like in the foreground. He's like kind of blurry, but the shield is still up. My question is, did Jessica lie? Or did she see like past that to him actually being dead, or was he like actually dead for like a couple seconds and then came back to consciousness or something?
Okay, I either think she lied or she just saw him down. Right? She saw him down with a sword through his body and thought he's gone. I don't think he like died for a second. I think it's either she lied, but I don't think she lied here.
Okay.
I don't put it past her to lie at all. But I don't think she did here. Okay. I think she saw him fully down with a sword through his back and thought like we gotta go. It's over.
That makes sense. Not a huge thing. I was just curious.
It was really well done because it was foreshadowed earlier.
It was so beautiful. They're in the tunnel thing. It looks so good.
And they're running, and she's helping them flee, and she tells them like, "I'm gonna find my own way. Y'all go here. It's only a 2-seater, the helicopter."
She's like, I'm Fremen.
Right. She's like, I have my own way. I'm Fremen.
The desert's my home. It's like, oh, it's so
and
good.
so they're in this like the dragonfly helicopter thing, and they start doing this great thing where they're cutting to the action, cutting back to the door, cutting to the action, cutting back to the door, and you're like, oh shit, they're gonna find him. They're gonna find him.
Really good.
It just builds suspense. And the plan was Dr. Kynes was gonna call a worm and write it back.
I don't know if I like knew that.
I don't think we did. I didn't know it.
After like the book and seeing the movie, that makes it so much cooler.
It
does.
She
was just gonna worm right out of there.
Because this is really cool. It's zoomed in on her. We think she's gonna get out of there somehow. We might not realize.
She's looking all like
triumphant, like exactly. Right. And then she gets stabbed.
And the coolest thing was it's not blood that sprayed. It was like water.
Because this was crazy to me. Because we're about to enter the Fremen world for real. And the whole thing to these Fremen people is that water is like life. And it's almost like sacred. It's not almost, it is. Yeah. It is sacred. It feels like religious to them, this water. And for her to be stabbed and the water is like instead of blood, because water is life.
It was good. It was so like and it just looked so because you're expecting blood, obviously. You've had so much bloodshed throughout the movie. That would just like really took me. Even
it's because the
watch,
suit, like it makes sense, but it was so good.
It's almost more impactful.
I would say it is more impactful. And she's down, but she says, I serve only one master, right? Because they say that you've betrayed us. And she says, I serve one master. His name is Shai Hulud. And I think that's the first. Have we? No, we have heard it before. But then she starts banging her fist. And this is where the worm comes and like devours them all.
Oh, it's good.
Really good. And their whole thing is back to Jessica and Paul is they're going to use this storm. And if they get high enough, they're not really in the storm. They're just in the dust. Yeah. And they can like fly away without being seen enough to avoid capture. But the Sardaukars on their heel and they start shooting missiles and they have to go through the storm now to avoid it. And it's like, I think this is like maybe my second favorite part is this, because we start getting these like visions that he's having of Jamis teaching him. I now realize I think it's how to ride a worm, right? And telling him like we must move with the flow of the process, and that and I think that's what he was teaching him. But Paul uses this to learn to like ride the storm because they're not making it out of here, like it's not going well. The window's cracking, and he decides to like literally go with the flow. And he pulls the wings in and just to like ride the storm almost the same way you would ride a worm, right?
It's crazy.
And is this just like another path of the future where Jamis was the one who taught him how to ride a worm?
That's what I kind of think.
I think so too.
And I have. Yeah, I wrote this down as well. Like the little we see of him, Jamis is teaching him things. Yes. And he like sort of the ghost of him lives on a little bit in the next movie. I'm also wondering, because it's Jamis and Chani who are intercut. So maybe like the future changed and Chani is the teacher now, which she very clearly is in the second movie. I'm not totally sure, but I liked it a lot. The storm it still makes me uncomfortable. seeing this like the fourth time, like the window cracks and it like I can feel myself there, and it looks like a just prolonged car accident. It looks so bad, and Jessica's having a panic attack in the passenger seat. And then like I can only imagine her when Paul's like, actually, I'm going to turn the car off. Like, it's wild.
I think about this in my daily life a lot for like years now, because I'll literally in my head I'll be like, just he's right, like we must move with the flow of the process, and I'll be like, okay, turn it off, right? Like, and just like go with it. And I think about that a lot, because it's like, I don't know, it's just a really, you would have never thought that this is where they were going to go with it, you know? And I think that's really cool. So the Baron is alive. He's in this black bath and he's like healing.
It looks like
oil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
he's like
oil
oily.
that you would dip bread in.
It made me want bread. So yeah.
It was cool though. It looked ominous.
Robin is his name, right? He's updating the Baron. He's basically like, they're dead. They're dead. And
to be fair, Dave Bautista did not yell in this scene.
That's true, yeah.
Which was great.
And he says, we'll begin selling spice slowly because we don't want the price to fall. And it's like, that's all it's ever been about him. He has nothing to even say about completely destroying an entire...
Yeah.
Because the next thing he says, they say, what about the Fremen? He says, kill them all, and goes back to his bath. And it's just like, no remorse.
Yeah.
No shame, nothing. And they get high enough. We're back to Paul and Jessica. They get high enough and they begin flying again, and basically they crash land. And this is like an example to me of how the movie, and maybe the book, but specifically the movie, makes every moment feel as cinematic and epic as possible. Why just land the plane when we can crash land it?
For sure.
You know? And I think they do that throughout the whole thing to make it interesting.
Well, and you get these gorgeous gliding shots first, where they're like, it looks heavenly in the wings, and then a wing is already broke and you're like, oh shit, and then you're like, okay, it's kind of working, then another wing breaks off and you're like, oh shit, for real, and then it's kind of working again, and then they crash land. It's visually gorgeous.
So they're looking for the Fremen now. They change in their suits, and he has this is another really important vision. It's Chani, and they see a desert mouse, and she says, even a desert mouse can survive. You'll need to face your fears. And she says, a friend will help you. And then Jamis is there.
This to me was like the what's it called? The revelation that like killing Jamis is going to be like
a big deal.
Facing your fear, right?
Right. Yes. And they say, follow the friend. And he says, Jamis says, you have much to learn and I will show you the ways of the desert. It's very cool because very much is this desert mouse supposed to represent Paul.
Well, and this is pretty on the note. Like, I will show you the ways of the desert by challenging you to this religious battle that we have, right? Like that is
you
pretty
have to utterly change who you are.
Exactly. You need to be reborn in order to kill me. You know, I'll be your teacher.
Exactly. So they learn how to sandwalk. They like run into a huge worm, but a thumper calls them away, and it's Jamis that was the one that saved them, which is really cool.
I put that down to, again, a teacher.
That he saved them, and then Paul has to like immediately kill him, you know?
This was another one that like a lot of discourse was like, if Paul isn't the chosen one, how come the worm like looked at him for a second? Because that's not how the 1984 movie does it. It like throws itself at the rocks a couple times, and I forget what the book does. But again, like explained away, the worms cannot see at all.
I figured.
So when they're traveling through the sand, they feel the vibrations. But as soon as the two humans walked onto rock, they like actually disappeared. So a lot of people are just like, the worm's probably actually confused, because then it started hearing a thumper like miles away.
Because it's also probably like, quote, listening or like feeling for vibrations.
Exactly.
Like it lost the trail, so it's trying to find the trail again.
So another interesting thing, water is like deathly poisonous to adult sandworms. That's why there's no water on Arrakis.
That makes sense. Okay.
Because it used to be like a bountiful paradise thing, and then the worms were introduced and like ate up everything. So they like don't even particularly try to hunt people, because people are made up of water, you know, and even like that much can be like poisonous to them, which I thought was really interesting.
They finally find the Fremen people. And this is cool because it is this like narrow pathway of rocks. And like he's clearly been having visions of this moment. And they're prepared to like fight. They have this like confrontation that gets like kind of violent, because Stilgar's basically like, we don't need Jessica here. Like she doesn't matter. And then she fights him and beats him hands down. She doesn't even use the voice. And I was like, love it.
And this, looking back on it again, it was kind of funny. Like, Stilgar's like in a chokehold. He's like, peace, woman, peace.
Right. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I didn't know you could do that. Like, how was I supposed to know, right? And he's like, their fates are going to be decided at the siege. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And we see that Chani was behind him the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically, like, right off the bat, she's like, yeah, I don't believe who you are. I don't believe that's real.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamis does not want to travel with him. And so he challenges Jessica. And Paul decides to be his champion. And it's like, as the sun is rising, they duel.
Oh my God. As soon as they said that, like, he was like, we can't, the sun's about to rise. And Jamis goes like something, then the sun will watch the death. And I was like, this is going to be the most pretty fucking fight in the world.
Right. And I was like, there's so many layers to not only the story, but the cinematography. Like, it didn't have to be during the sunrise. You know, it didn't have to be, but it just adds to, it makes it more entertaining when you have multiple things going on at once. Paul starts kind of having these visions about like what's going to happen. And it says in like almost the voice, and it's like, and it's like rising to rise. You must do this, you must rise.
Must die for the
exactly.
to live.
He says, it says Paul Atreides must die. And when you take a life, you take your own. And it's clear that this is going to be like this rebirth moment of killing Jamis, and he will be changed because it's this whole idea of him going from Paul himself to like regular Paul, like heir to the House Atreides, and then to prophet, to Messiah. And this was like the step of him. It's like, this is where the rise to that starts, I would say, is why it is like the rebirth moment. And they duel, and he doesn't want to kill him. And in the same way, he doesn't want to be the Messiah. He does not want to kill Jamis. And he does it anyways, you know?
The fight is very cool. They do this in the second movie as well. There was no music, which I don't know how they do it. I wrote this down. This is my at least fourth time watching it. My stomach is still in knots watching this fight scene, because it is something about the choreography, the angles, how the actors are taking it. Like, these are some of the most intense one-on-one sword fights I think I've ever watched.
I think it's because it's really fast. It's really intricate.
It's really fast. There's always a crowd watching.
And I also think it has to do with the length of the blades.
Yeah.
Because they aren't daggers.
They're
super
not close together.
So they're not like so close together that you can't really see what's going on, but they're not swords. So it's not the swords hitting each other, So it's both a mindset, because it even starts with like Jamis just like hitting him.
Yeah.
So it is this like, they're very close, but it's not dagger level.
I just love it. I absolutely love how they do these one-on-one fight scenes.
And I thought this specifically very much to me is so cool when we are comparing it to the end of Dune 2. Because it clearly is meant to mirror that. It starts with Jamis saying, Jamis, his teacher, right?
Well, this was literally the beginning of the journey. And then we go full circle by the end.
Jamis, who is his teacher, who, right, like quotes, like that's what he shows him the way of the desert, because he leads him to this rebirth, to become this different person. And he starts it by saying, may thy knife chip and shatter. And that's I know that's like the way to start it, but I think it's cool that in the second movie, that is exactly how Paul starts his fight against Fade Rotha. Because he is fully immersed in this Fremen world now. He is a different person. Because he starts it here with the like ba
and he still
thing.
Does the thing though, right? He says, "May my knife chip and shatter," and the
because he's this
thing.
Part of two worlds. He's got this.
It's so good.
He's of two birthrights, like the Reverend Mother said.
So
it's very cool. Basically, there's no yielding, and Paul doesn't realize this, and he starts having these visions of blood on his hands, but he kills Jamis anyways. It ends with Stilgar, like he doesn't want to.
Well, it's like, it's the final vision. It's like, you need to rise. And then you see the shot of him, and it's the playing, and he's a different person. And you're like, oh shit, that's the chosen one right there.
Right.
And he just does it. It's one blow and he's done.
It's fast too, like once he chooses it. And
they don't even show it. It's like on his back or something.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because that wasn't like the point, the how wasn't. Because he goes through a really crazy transformation in the second one. And that's why I think this is like the start of that, the trajectory.
Yeah. It's weird because like in my mind, it's such a gradual thing, but they're very specific things. I think the first time he talks to Dr. Kynes and he's like, I could be the emperor, I could marry the emperor's daughter. Like that's him almost like
not realizing
seeing what I
even,
can do. Like, let's see, just like,
yeah.
let's see what happens. And this is the point where it's like, wait a minute, am I the chosen one? You
Yes.
know? Or like, at least am I the one, in fact, that like, oh, I could really get what I want.
I also think, because in the second one, he tries so hard not to do it. And at a certain point, he flips and changes his mind, you know? Because here, I wonder, are there moments where maybe he believes it could be real?
I think in this movie, no.
Okay.
Is what I'm thinking. But I also think it's because this is overwhelming. I think the voices talking to him in his visions, I feel like he believes those.
Yes.
But I don't know if he believes it in the sense that, like, I'm the chosen one. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, I think it's a separate thing. Like, I feel like in his mind, it's like, oh, this is just like what needs to happen in like my story. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Again, he's also inspired by his dad, right? His dad was gonna go and like be with the Fremen. So I think in his mind, this is his way to like give himself to the desert, like what his father wanted, how he's going to rally the troops his father wanted to rally, to do what his father wanted to do. So I think his mind is more on that at this moment than the prophetic side. And he's just using that prophecy, like we said, to sort of help the cause.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense. Because he also like, he wanted, in the second movie, he wants to stay Fremen. He wants to, that's what he wants to do. He just wants to stay here and try to take down, using the Fremen, take down, like live in that world, you know? Okay, that makes sense. So basically, it ends and Stilgar says, you're one of us now. And Jessica wants to get off world, but he says, no, my father came not for the spice or for the money, but for the strength of your people. And he says, my road leads into the desert. I can see it. That's so at this point, I don't think he thinks the visions are like, quote, bad, you know, in the same way he kind of believes them to be, because Chani kind of helps him in the second movie see the negative side to what's happening. So he might not fully see that yet.
Yeah.
You know?
This is a tiny thing. I also really like immediately after the fight, Paul like grabs Jamis's hands and he's like ushered away as they put Jamis in like the water sucker suit, which like does a couple things which I thought was just really cool. It like remembering how important water is again, which is always fun, and then just again like showing how cruel the world is. Like this person that they knew and liked and were friends with like died, and the first thing is like, well, let's get his water,
right?
You know.
But I do think they feel like that is like a sacred way to die, you know?
Sure, yeah.
And I missed this, but Chani gives him the knife, which is a huge deal. Chani gives him the Chris knife, and she basically is like, I don't think this is who you are, but I want you to die with honor. And he's a good fighter. And I think he like wants to tell her something that changes his mind. Cause like, what do you do when you, I like that he didn't say anything and that just went with a never mind. Cause what do you say to someone that you've been seeing for like months now?
That's the thing. As he was pausing, I was like, what? Yeah, I don't know what you would say.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
There's so much to be said.
They begin to travel. The Fremen lead the way through the desert, which is obviously such a religious like imagery. Sure. And we end by seeing someone riding a worm, and
so good.
And it's such like a, ooh, what's the next movie, you know? And he says desert power, which Leto had multiple times in this movie been the one to say desert power.
Chani said, so cheeky. She's like, this is only the beginning.
Right. Meaning of like Fremen culture, I think, but like also in this like bigger scheme of things.
Oh yeah, she knew what she was doing.
Jessica and Paul follow. We see Chani. We see Paul.
We see Paul give Chani a little smile.
Right.
Cheeky little, I've been dreaming about you for months smile.
Right. But then we end on Jessica.
We end on Jessica looking not happy.
Because I think this is where the shift happened for her. Because Jessica's character to me in the second movie is insane. Obviously, we'll talk about when we do the second movie. But I think this is where she's like, sees her path now too. And I think it's crazy to end on Jessica. We didn't end on Paul in this movie. Like, yes, we had the ending shot of like them walking through the desert, but like the last face we saw, the last like piece into the puzzle was Jessica.
The biggest moving piece
was Jessica.
To end this movie out,
And I think that's like such a choice because she sees Paul, she sees Chani, she sees these people and is like, yeah, here we go.
Well,
like,
Lisa this wasn't her choice. Like Paul was like, I'm going. So she's like, all right, this is what we're doing. Very in the style of like, you can almost make an argument like that's why her and Leto work together, right? Like she's so prideful. She takes things head on, just like the Atreides, right? So she's like, all right, this is our situation. How, like, I am going to control this now.
I think that's even what she wants, right? She doesn't want to be the one quote, making the decisions, even though she is doing it. So like that's right where she's at home, right? Manipulating men
let's make Paul a god.
Right. Manipulating men to make these decisions. And so I think she saw the path here of how he is going to be the Lisan al-Gaib, how they are going to use this, and it all place for her here.
Because her plan starts unfolding real quick in the second movie.
The only thing I want to say is I think it was a cool choice to end here, because I still felt like they could have ended it at the like obliteration of the people. And I think they originally decided to go in with their journey a little bit more. And I think they even shot some scenes with it.
Really?
But I think it was a much cooler choice to have this be the climax of Paul choosing to have this rebirth and to kill someone. Yeah. And because one, that like makes it climactic. He had to choose something. He didn't choose anything with this bombing of House Atreides, right? Yeah. He didn't choose anything. It wasn't Paul making a choice and changing things. So this helped, I think, the story feel like Paul's story more by ending here, but it also felt climactic.
I totally agree. That's interesting to hear that they shot more scenes and maybe thought about ending it earlier. I think you're exactly right.
They didn't think about ending it earlier. I just said like I could see that having been an idea.
I see. But choosing to end on a Paul's decision, specifically to be reborn again, right, is the perfect prologue to the next movie, which is Man Comes to Town. You know, like newborn man comes to, and this is really like this first movie is the death of Paul. Yes, is what happened. Like that is the story, and then the second story is
the growth of the Lisan al-Gaib, right? Exactly. This is the death of Paul and the birth of the Lisan al-Gaib.
It's perfect. You know? It's perfect. Really, I'm trying to say Man Comes to Town or Man Leaves Town more so we can sell merchandise with that. Okay. But yeah, I think it was a perfect place to end. Again, I really can't get over how interested I was in the prologue to Dune 2. Right. Like, it is crazy. Because again, it's like, it does stand on its own as a movie. Like, it's a really good movie. After seeing Dune 2, I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to watch Dune 2 more, you know? Yeah. But it's so good. I can't understate that.
I think it is absolutely everything like a part one of a story could do, you know? And I think I read that they didn't market this as part one until like in the theaters when they said part one. And I was listening to, this is a while ago.
I also think I remember that.
I was listening to a podcast and someone was saying even when they were in theater, they didn't see the words part one. Oh. And they like couldn't remember if maybe they had thought of it, if they had missed it or something, but it was two people thought that. And that maybe they added that later. So like,
interesting. Were people upset that it was a part one?
They didn't market it that way because maybe they were worried people would be.
Maybe. I just feel like it's so like it's definitely it's a movie.
Well, you know? I feel like are you gonna go see Dune Part 1 or are you gonna go see Dune?
That's true. So, well, because I'm wondering because like not at the exact same time, but the Across the Spider-Verse movies came out similarly, and everybody was so mad that was a part one.
Yeah, but this one said part one at the beginning. Yeah. And this one to me, because we can do an episode on Spider-Verse, but
I'd love to.
I think that second one, it didn't feel like it had a climactic end resolution, and this movie did. They did such a great job. Yeah. That's what I mean by everything a part one could be. Yeah. It was entertaining, it was cinematic, it was a great setup, but it also followed an actual plot structure, and you weren't left feeling like you weren't given a story. And to me, I don't think that's fair. A part one needs to have a full story. And I think they did that so brilliantly to feel like we had a climax and a resolution. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's really tricky. And they did it. Yeah. I feel like I'm talking. Is there anything else you want to say? I don't know. We're doing this in preparation to talk about Dune Prophecies, which is the new show coming out set like 10,000 years before. Yeah. Whatever. And I hope I don't know, it's going to be hard to see Dune translated to TV just because of like how budgets work, like how time commitments to things. I've got high hopes for it though. I hope it's really good. I hope it is. Because I can't like, I don't know. I love Dune 1 and boy, I think Dune 2 might be one of my favorite movies of all time. I would probably put mine up there with that too. It's so good. And I'm really excited to talk about it on the next episode. But I think that's all I have for Dune 1. We've been talking our heads off. It's great. It's so good. I'm going to give a quote and we can end on that. Perfect. Okay. The handmaiden that gives Jessica the blade says. Shout out Mapes. She says, when you have lived with prophecy for so long, the moment of revelation becomes a shock.
Wait, can I end on another thing?
Yeah,
this was another like prophecy coincidence thing that I was reading on Reddit. So she pulls out the Chris knife, right? The tooth of Shia-Lut, right? And in the book, it shows like Jessica's inner monologue, and she like shut out goes, "Do you know what this is?" And she was going to say a creator of death. But instead she says a creator, and then shut out hears creator and starts yelling. She does the thing, like affirming the prophecy, cutting Jessica off, and Jessica just decides to roll with it.
Wow.
Right? It's so good.
Because at its core, what this epic story is about like manipulating people and religiously being able to do so. And that's why the Bene Gesserits having this power of the voice is so clever, because they don't even use the voice to manipulate people. They just use their natural ability to propagate things, right? To create this and this like confirmation bias, because people want to believe in a savior. People want to believe in that. And especially for such an oppressed group of people as the Fremen, of course, they're going to think like we have faith, you know? And I think that's like such a good example of it. I think that scene is a good example of it too.
Well, and check this out. It goes another layer deeper. The Reddit post continued. Not only does she say it's the creator of death, she was going to say that, but the way she was going to say it, like the specific words, the creator, the Bene Gesserit came up with this prophecy. So they've been trained in knowing the prophecy, knowing the words that everyone's looking for. So that like not only did she say something and was cut off, the way she said it was to allow something like that to happen, right? Like everything is built in from the beginning to give the Bene Gesserit every single pull they could. It's so good.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm really excited because Dune 2 gets into this like savior narrative and this like religious figure a lot more. And I think that's like what I'm most interested in, is this like this chosen one that's being forced to be a chosen one by all aspects. Like that is what's so interesting to me, and like borders on philosophical. So like that's why I think Dune 2 is such a masterpiece, and I'm like so excited to talk about that specifically.
I think it's really good. Dune 2 is phenomenal. Something in the book. So Dune Part 1 and Part 2 are all from the same one book, Dune, but there are other books that continue. And the tricky part about the series, I haven't read it, but this is like from like video essays I've watched. It skips ahead like multiple generations after that. Like once Paul is like fully realized as his chosen one, he has kids, and his kid turns out to be like the super actual chosen one. And because of that, he lives like 1,000 years or something. Wow. So each book starts taking place farther and farther away, like hundreds of years. So aside from like either Paul or Paul's son, who's like Leto the second, he's named
Leto 2.
Like either like it's one of them living for generations. Like everybody else is new. Like you find new characters, and it's hard to sort of relate to those because they're always brand new. But in the same theme, I feel like that maybe is a reason they set this new series, Dune Prophecies, so far in the past, right? It's attached sort of in the essence of what Dune is.
Yeah.
So all that to say, very excited to talk about Dune 2 next time.
Yeah. So next week, Dune 2. And then after that, we're going to start talking about Dune Prophecy, the series. Very excited, which premieres November 17th.
Nice. Stay tuned. We'll have an episode out soon after that. If you liked hearing our opinions on Dune, or have your own opinions, theories, again, I read the book, but I forgot a lot of it. So tell us what we got wrong. Tell us like crazy things about the book or the movies we didn't realize. Follow us on all the different platforms. We're on Instagram, TikTok, available where podcasts are, any streaming podcasts. We've really enjoyed the comments throughout these episodes. Talking with other fans, either agreeing or disagreeing, is super fun. But until next time, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this has been Welcome to the Writer's Room. See you in the next one.